Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. In a remote corner of the province, where time seemed to flow slower than in the rest of the world, there lived a girl named Miranda. She was special, but not in a way that one would immediately notice. Miranda was shy and incredibly modest in her eyes. Hidden behind the right thick glasses, always burned a light of curiosity. She glided through the world as if trying to unravel the mysteries it hid. From the first days of her school life, Miranda became a target for her classmates. Her clumsy movements and mixed responses to teachers' questions drew ridicule. Her classmates, young and inexperienced, quickly coined the nickname Bogeyman for her. Miranda tried to hide from them, withdrawing into herself and immersing herself in the world of books that had become her refuge. School, a noisy life full of friendly conversations and laughter. Miranda passed by. She was lonely, as if a wall separated her from others. Failures in her studies and misunderstanding from her classmates made her days much harder. But there was one bright spot in this story: her brother James. James was a soldier serving in the army on a remote military base. He only came home once a year for a short vacation. For Miranda, every time he came home was a celebration. She waited for him as an escape from her gray and lonely everyday life. When James was home, he always tried to make her life a little brighter. He told her war stories, gave her books, and even taught her how to shoot an air rifle. James saw something special in Miranda that the others couldn't or wouldn't see. One rainy day, Miranda met her future friend Lisa. It was during recess when Miranda was walking down the hallway and heard crying. She went to the source of the sound and saw a little kitten that seemed lost and scared. Miranda did not hesitate and picked the kitten up in her arms and tried to comfort it. Suddenly, Lisa appeared from around the corner. It was Miranda's classmate, a girl with long brown hair and bright eyes. Lisa was the first beauty in the class, but she had a bad reputation because of her arrogant behavior. Lisa approached Miranda and the kitten with curiosity. But when she saw Miranda tenderly caring for the little animal, what changed in her expression? Lisa is a troublemaker, reconsidered her attitude towards her class homeland. "Did you save that kitten?" asked the girl with genuine surprise. Miranda nodded slowly, smiling. "Yes, he was lost and scared. I couldn't leave him alone." A smile slipped across Lisa's face, and she stroked the kitten's head. "He's so cute. Maybe let's find a home for him." It was the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Lisa and Miranda began to spend time together caring for the little pet, who was named Mazurchik. Lisa suddenly stopped bullying Miranda and even defended her when someone tried to play pranks on her. Together, they searched for a new home for Marshak and found it with a kind family who promised to take care of the kitten. This experience brought Lisa and Miranda even closer together. However, life at school continued to bring its challenges. One of the bullies, Mason, who had previously bullied Miranda, decided it was okay to go even further and cripple her soul. His jealousy of Miranda and Lisa's friendship led him to decide to mutilate her confidence in those around her. One rainy day, Miranda met her brother James. He was in uniform after school with red epaulets and a twinkle in his eye. Meeting him always filled Miranda with warmth and hope. She quickly told him about Mason and how he had attacked her. James expressed anger and determination lit up in his eyes. "No one should hurt you, Miranda. I've made sure that Mason won't touch you again." Back home, James found Mason and right at school gave him one last chance. He warned him that if he touched Miranda one more time, he wouldn't get away from him alive. This episode was an important turning point in Miranda's life, and she realized that she had her brother to protect her. The summer slowly faded into the sunset, leaving behind bright memories and the hope that new opportunities lay ahead. Miranda spent this time preparing for her return to school. She carefully chose her study aids, bought new notebooks and pencils, trying to stay ahead of the curve and not fall behind. She knew there would be many challenges in the new school year, but she was ready to face them head-on. Her brother James came for a short vacation, and every meeting with him was a real treat for Miranda. She told him about her academic success and her friendship with Lisa. James listened to her, encouraged her carefully, and was proud of his little sister. One day they were sitting in the cozy living room. A lamp was burning on the table in front of them, and snowflakes were slowly falling outside the window. James asked a question that Miranda had heard for the first time, but it became one of the key questions in her life. "Miranda, what do you want to do in the future?" he asked, looking at her with a serious expression on his face. Miranda looked at her hands as if searching for an answer. "I'm not sure, James. I like to paint. It makes me happy. But I don't know. Maybe I should just go to college and study something serious." James smiled and stroked her head. "Miranda, you should follow your heart. If painting makes you happy, then that should be your path. A serious education is important, but you shouldn't forget about your dreams either." This conversation left a deep mark in Miranda's soul. She realized that it is important to follow your hobbies and passions. This is what gives meaning to life. She now knew that she wanted to become an artist and dedicate herself to art. As the school year progressed, Miranda became more immersed in the world of art. She read books about great artists, attended exhibitions, and was genuinely fascinated by the work of others. Her talent only grew stronger, and her drawings became more and more expressive and profound. Her friendship with Lisa continued to grow stronger as well. They spent a lot of time together, and each gave the other inspiration. Lisa, with her vivacity and energy, gave Miranda confidence, and Miranda, with her deep sensitivity in return, helped Lisa to better understand the world around her. Despite all the positive changes, however, Miranda could not completely forget that terrible day when Mason had attacked her. The fear of him remained in her heart, and she was cautious in her interactions with other classmates. That experience taught her that you can't trust everyone indiscriminately, and she became more careful in choosing her friends. The journey in the art world was just beginning for Miranda, and she was still in school. Despite the constant challenges, she tried not to lose heart. Her days were filled with classes that seemed boring and monotonous to her. But even among the gray routine, she found bright moments. Miranda spent a lot of time in the library. It was her refuge, a place where she could escape from worldly cares and plunge into the world of books. The lines and pages became her companions and the characters her friends. She immersed herself in different worlds, and each new book opened new horizons for her. Her imagination ran wild, and she began to dream of creating her own stories and worlds. Miranda dreamed of the day she would find her puzzle and put it together. She knew that there are no rigid rules in art, and each artist finds their own way. Her brother James was the only one who always believed in her. He was in the army and came home once a year for a vacation. The meetings with him became a real holiday for Miranda. They spent days telling each other about their adventures and dreams. James was not only a big brother, but also a mentor to Miranda. He taught her courage and determination. He told Miranda, "Life may be hard, but are you stronger than you think? Believe in yourself and your abilities. You can achieve anything. What are your dreams?" These words became a source of inspiration for the girl. She knew that the path to art could be long and difficult, but she was ready to walk it. She dreamed of creating works of art that would inspire and touch people's hearts. One day, James brought Miranda an antique book about the life and work of a great artist. She read about his passion for art, his creative journey, and how he found inspiration in the most ordinary things. It had become her board book, a book she reread over and over again. James smiled, looking at his sister, and said, "Miranda, you are as strong and talented as that artist. Don't forget that. You can overcome any difficulty if you believe in yourself and your dream." Miranda embraced this book as a symbol of her passion. She was ready for hardships because she knew their journey was just beginning. Her days at school continued, and Miranda faced challenges every day. She was bullied by the entire school, calling her ugly. These words cut the young girl's soul, but she didn't let them break her. She remembered her brother's words and believed that she had something special in her. One day, one of the bullies at school went too far. He took away her innocence and left her with a deep wound on her soul. This horrible incident only added to her misery, and she decided not to tell anyone about it. She was afraid that she would be judged and bullied again. Miranda tried to hide her pain behind a smile and a mask of joy. She didn't want to bother her brother, who was far away, knew he was worried about her, and didn't want to add to his worries. However, fate had something unexpected in store for them both. Summer had arrived and James had come home on vacation. Meeting his brother was like the best gift to Miranda. They spent days together walking around town, talking and laughing. One day when they were walking in the park, James noticed that his sister had become more reserved and closed off. He sensed that something was wrong with her and decided to ask her a question. "Miranda, is something bothering you? Can you tell me about it? I am always here to help," he said, looking at her with concern. Miranda hesitated, but then decided to share her pain and fear with her brother. She told him about what had happened at school and how it had changed her life. James was shocked and angry at those who had hurt his sister. He hugged Miranda and told her that she was not alone, that he was always there to protect her. "We will overcome together. This is Miranda. You are a strong, smart, and talented girl. Don't let this incident define your life. You have a future, and I will support you every step of the way," he said with firm confidence. Miranda felt that her brother, her support and protector, he was giving her hope and faith in herself. In that moment, she realized that she was not alone, that she had a family that would always support her in times of need. Miranda and Lisa walked through the storm, ready for the new challenges that life had in store for them. Their friendship grew stronger every day, and they supported each other in difficult moments. Lisa, a former troublemaker, reconsidered her attitude towards homeland from the classroom. They spent a lot of time together, teaching each other what they knew best. Miranda shared her knowledge of art with Lisa, and Lisa helped Miranda understand the complexities of the world, of social relationships. They became inseparable girlfriends, and their friendship was like a ray of light in a dark world. But life at school continued to present challenges. One day, when they returned from summer vacation, they learned that school had become even tougher, and some students had become more aggressive. They had to face new forms of bullying and pressure. Lisa felt supported and understood for the first time. She wasn't going to stay on the sidelines. She stood up for Miranda. And now the two of them were fighting problems together. Their friendship was their shield, and they knew they could rely on each other. One day, when one of the girls in the class tried to bully Miranda, Lisa stood up to her and said, "Enough. We're not going to let you hurt Miranda anymore. If you think you can intimidate us, you are wrong." This incident was the turning point. The girl was frightened by Lisa's determination and no longer approached Miranda. It was a small victory, but they knew they still had a lot of fighting to do. Miranda and Lisa continued to grow and develop as individuals. Their lessons in art and life made them stronger. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were willing to step forward no matter what. Their story continued, and they knew that better moments awaited them in the future. Their friendship was their treasure, and they were willing to protect it at all costs. Miranda and Lisa were true friends with hardship and time. Their friendship was an example of the strength in unity and how the support of loved ones can change a lifetime. With each new day, their confidence grew. They were no longer afraid of those who bullied them. They began to protect not only themselves, but also other students who were also being bullied for different reasons. Their teacher, young and inspired, saw the potential in this friendship and decided to create a project at the art school where students could express their feelings and ideas through art. This project became a refuge of sorts for Miranda and Lisa. Under the guidance of their teacher, they began working on a collective project that combined painting, music, and word art. They created pieces that reflected their own experiences and feelings. It was their way of expressing the whole gamut of emotions they were experiencing in their lives. Their project became prominent in school and even won an award at a local art competition. It was a recognition of their talent and effort. Miranda and Lisa felt that they were on the right track. They also continued to pursue art separately. Miranda developed her painting skills and created amazing paintings that were admired by all who saw them. Her work became sought after in school exhibitions, and she was even invited to exhibit her paintings in a local gallery show. Lisa, on the other hand, began to delve deeper into music. She studied guitar and piano and began writing her own songs. Her music became an expression of her feelings and emotions, and she sang with such passion that her lyrics touched the hearts of all who listened. But of course, there are always obstacles on the road to success. One day, on the day of an important concert, Lisa accidentally threw her music case into the trash. When did she realize she'd lost all her songs? She almost cried. But Miranda was there to support her. Together, they dug through the trash and even got to the custodian in the school restroom to find the lost sheet music. After hours of searching, they finally found the pencil case and made it back in time for the concert. Lisa performed her songs with such sincerity that the audience was amazed. After Miranda and Lisa's successful concert, the party was fun. Students and parents and teachers gathered to celebrate the successes of the young talents. Miranda and Lisa were glowing with joy and satisfaction. However, the joy did not last long. Shortly after the concert, Miranda discovered that her briefcase had been opened and something had been taken out. At first, she couldn't understand what was missing, but then she realized that her personal drawings and sketches had disappeared. Miranda's heart sank into her heels. She knew that one of her classmates clearly disapproved of her success and decided to strike a blow. It was a blow to the sorest spot in her art. Miranda appealed to the teachers and school administration, but proving who had done it proved difficult. She was disappointed and outraged that one of her fellow humans could do such a cruel thing. However, Miranda did not give up. She began to recreate her work from scratch, restoring what had been lost. It was another difficult stage in her journey into art, but she moved forward with determination. In the meantime, Lisa also faced challenges. She decided to record her songs in the studio to share her music with a larger audience. But when she received the recording of her songs, she found that the sound quality left much to be desired. One of her classmates had clearly put a stick in the wheel. Lisa was disappointed, but she didn't give up. She began to learn the technical aspects of recording and refined her skills. Her drive for perfection and desire to share her music with the world was stronger than any obstacle. Miranda and Lisa continued to evolve as an artist, a musician. Their art became not just a way to express themselves, but also a way to fight back against those who tried to hinder them. They did not give up in the face of adversity. Their passion for art was unwavering. Theirs was a story of perseverance and fortitude. They continued their artistic journey, ready for new challenges, knowing that even in the most difficult moments, they could rely on their passion and friendship. Miranda and Lisa continued to explore the world of art. Their passion for creating was unbreakable. They knew their friendship was something special, but the past was still a part of their story. As they grew closer to each other, changes began to happen at school. Lisa, formerly known as the girl who supported Miranda's bullying, tried to change her reputation. She saw how Miranda always found the strength to defend the weak, including the little kittens on the street. Lisa thought that maybe she too could earn the friendship of her classmates if she tried to be a better person. However, her attempt at change was unsuccessful. When her classmates saw her in Miranda's company, they raised their eyebrows and even mocked her. She was disappointed to find herself outside of the pack she wanted to find her place in. That disappointment intensified when the taunts and mockery began again. They were less fierce, but more sly. Lisa, sitting down in her seat in class, often found her desk covered in water. She concentrated on the lesson, didn't notice the wetness until she sat down, and the class would start laughing. Such incidents were subtle and telling. They emphasized that Lisa was still not a full member of the school pack, despite her attempts to change. Her friend Miranda, who always stood at her defense, came to the rescue again. But this time, the bullying was more devious and harder to fight. Lisa felt trapped. She tried to gain the friendship and acceptance of her classmates, but instead, she faced even more difficulties. Her past, as well as the ridicule we did with, shadowed over her present, and she could not rid herself of that shadow. Miranda, seeing her friend suffering, became even closer to her. She understood how hard it can be to change and find your place in the world, especially at school where bullying can be brutal. She was supportive of Lisa, trying to help her overcome these difficulties. However, there were also bright moments in their lives when they created together. They forgot the mean words and taunts. Their art was their salvation, and they knew it could change the world around them. Lisa contemplated ending her friendship with Miranda. The bitterness of the recent taunts and the laughter of her classmates mingled in her mind. She began to question whether it was worth continuing her relationship with Miranda if it brought such more humiliation. The morning after the water on the chair incident, Lisa did not socialize with her friend. They walked past each other without paying attention. It was the first time they had not socialized at school, and it was painful and unaccustomed. However, even without communication, they could not avoid being bullied by their classmates. Their coworkers were unhappy and found new ways to prank both of them. They poured water on the chairs, through their pencil case and all over the classroom, and even made practical jokes, enshrining them in their textbooks. Miranda, on the other hand, tried to find a way to get back at her classmates, but she was unwilling to do it with the same cruelty they displayed. Various ideas crossed her mind, but they all seemed too cruel and undignified. She realized that revenge would not solve the problem, and that violence would only make things worse. She felt stumped, not knowing how to protect herself and Lisa. Time passed, and both girls continued to feel the pain of the taunts and bullying. But one day, Lisa remembered the entire journey they had traveled together. She remembered those moments when Miranda was the only person who believed in her and supported her. She remembered how the two of them had rescued a little kitten, how they created art that expressed their feelings and dreams. These memories filled her heart with warmth and hope. Lisa realized that her friendship with Miranda was something unique and valuable, despite all the hardships. And in that moment, she made a decision. She decided that she would not abandon her friend despite the ridicule and bullying. Lisa turned back to Miranda, smiled, and said, "Let's not let them ruin our friendship. We can get through this together like we always have." Miranda smiled back and agreed. They realized that friendship is not only about laughter and joy, but also about support in difficult moments. They were willing to walk through the storm together as best friends. The next day at school, everything went quietly and unnoticed. Classmates didn't bully, not Miranda, not Lisa. That was unusual. And all because there was a school-wide inspection that day. Teachers were especially vigilant and demanding about uniform behavior and classroom order. Usually bullying happened when the teachers weren't around. On this day, they were almost always there and present. This made the atmosphere in the classroom more tense, and classmates became more cautious. They squinted at Miranda and Lisa, and if anything, they threw papers at them at most. After the school day, Miranda and Lisa decided to take a walk in the park. They needed some rest and solitude. After a busy day at school, the park was their sanctuary, a place where they could relax and forget about all the worries of school. They walked silently along the paths of the park, listening to the sound of the leaves under their feet. The winds were beginning to bring the first signs of autumn, and the leaves were beginning to change their color to bright shades of red and yellow. The air was cool, but pleasant. As they walked, they stopped periodically at the pond, watching the water birds and listening to their singing. It was a moment of peace and tranquility in their lives where they could just enjoy the moment. But despite the pleasant day, the clouds in their friendship still hadn't completely disappeared. Miranda sometimes wondered how she could get back at her classmates for all the bullying, but she knew she didn't want to grovel to their level of cruelty. Lisa, on the other hand, felt that her friendship with Miranda had become an excessive burden for her. She questioned whether she should continue the relationship if it was causing so much pain. But at the same time, She couldn't forget all the times Miranda had been of true support to her. Night began to descend on the park, and the girls decided to head home. They walked in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts and feelings. Friendship was like a thin wire that sometimes required a gentle cord of paternity. They knew that the next day at school might bring new challenges and trials, but they also knew that they were ready to walk through the storm together as best friends, regardless of any difficulties that might come their way. Miranda woke up exactly on her alarm clock. As always, she immediately plunged into her morning routine, washed her face, ate, dressed, and got ready for a new day at school. But her morning was filled with anxiety. She couldn't help but think about Lisa and what awaited them at school today. As she walked down the road to school, her thoughts swirled around her friend and her classmates. Each new day was a challenge for them, and Miranda knew that she would have to face these challenges head-on. Lisa was already waiting for Miranda at the entrance of the school. They greeted each other with a smile to each other, but inside both girls, anxiety was simmering. Already at the entrance of the school, they heard giggles and taunts towards them, but they decided to ignore it and silently headed to their classroom. In the classroom, the familiar sight of water on Miranda's desk awaited them, but they didn't even pay attention to it. They were used to these childish pranks. They just wiped the water off and sat down. The teacher hadn't come in yet, but in the meantime, Miranda and Lisa were trying to concentrate on the lesson, though Miranda had other thoughts. She was thinking about her brother, who was due to arrive at the end of spring. His visit was her best hope for a bright future and encouragement, but her musings were interrupted when she was called to the blackboard. She didn't expect it and found herself unprepared to answer. She had to stand in front of the whole class, feeling the stares of her classmates, and she couldn't answer the teacher's question correctly. The result was a disappointing D. The situation did not improve during recess. Classmates found new ideas for bullying, throwing their pencils in the trash or even coloring their notebooks. The day dragged on slowly. The girls tried to ignore the taunts and bullying. Their friendship was their pillar, and they didn't want anything to destroy it. When night fell, Miranda and Lisa were home again, tired and from a busy day at school. They knew that tomorrow would bring a new challenge, and they were ready to face it together. As always, supporting each other. Friendship was their weapon in this struggle, and they hoped it would help them get through the storm and find a brighter future together. As winter approached, Miranda and Lisa were already beginning to savor the first snow and the joyous winter games. They dreamed of snowball fights, making snowmen, and winter walks. It was a time of year they adored. However, Odnoklassniki did not stop bullying the girls. Miranda began to wonder what the reason for this bullying was. She spent countless hours wondering what she was doing wrong. She could not understand why her appearance was the cause of ridicule and violence from her peers. These reflections were painful for her. Lisa, on the other hand, knew that the bullying stemmed from their friendship. She was ugly and classy. Her friendship with Miranda drew the attention of her classmates to her. Lisa saw them making fun of Miranda, and it hurt her to see her friend being bullied. But she also realized that her friendship with Miranda was the most precious thing to her, and she was not going to change her principles because of the ridicule. One thing led to another. Winter was coming closer and closer. The girls dreamed of the first snow and the joyful moments it would bring. They planned games of snowballs, making snowmen, and even skiing trips. Miranda was able to keep in touch with her brother James through mail and sometimes the phone. They wrote letters to each other, and Miranda was always happy when another letter from him arrived. In these letters, they shared their thoughts, impressions, and news from their lives. However, when James asked her how Miranda was doing, she often answered normally. Not wanting to tell them the truth about what was going on at her school, it hurt her to think that her brother might be worried and anxious about her, about the bullying and ridicule she was experiencing. She wanted to keep the appearance of a strong and independent girl in front of her brother so she wouldn't bother him. James, for his part, also tried not to burden his sister with his worries. He was away from home, serving in the army, and he wanted Miranda to feel good and safe. He was the one who always believed in her and supported her. His letters were true celebrations for Miranda, moments of bright hope in her hard daily life. So Miranda and James kept in touch through letters and short phone conversations, but each of them tried not to bother the other with their problems and worries. It was their way of keeping in touch and maintaining hope for a brighter future despite all the difficulties they faced. With the onset of winter, snowdrifts became commonplace. But for Miranda and Lisa, it also meant more ridicule and humiliation from their classmates. As soon as the first snow fell, they began to use it as a tool for bullying. They came up with new ways to bully. Some of them would push some of the girls into snowdrifts, making them fall. Others would do tripping, putting their feet up to make someone trip and fall face first into the snow, and some would just throw snowballs. But they did it with such force that they could hurt. One of the Mason boys went too far. He and two of his friends got into a collision when she was walking home alone. They dropped her in a snowdrift and gave her a terrible bullying, water bluff. She was all wet with tears. It was one of the worst moments of her life when Miranda finally made it home. Her parents noticed something was wrong with her clothes and hair. They met her with questions about what was wrong. Miranda, struggling to hold back tears and trying not to tell them about the bullying, said she fell hard in a snowdrift. Her parents were concerned, but she didn't want to worry them with her problems. Such incidents began to recur with appalling regularity. For Miranda and Lisa, winter was a time of fear and humiliation, and they tried to hide what was happening at school from their parents and teachers. But pain was building up in their hearts. They found it harder and harder to hide their suffering. Despite the hard days at school in the winter, Miranda had some bright moments in her life. She loved playing snowballs with her parents, and that was a real comfort to her. They would spend hours outdoors, dreaming snow into each other and laughing. But playing with Lisa was becoming a rarity. Lisa, trying to avoid being humiliated by her classmates, tried to stay away from Miranda. She didn't want their friendship to become the cause of more ridicule. Sometimes, however, they still managed to meet and have fun. They even made a snowman one cold day and took a real carrot for his nose. These moments brought joy and warmth to the gray winter days. But unfortunately, the bright moments were rare and short. The days at school were slow, and sometimes classmates were particularly cruel. They not only covered Miranda with snow, but also created funny snow looks that caused the whole school to laugh. Lisa, watching this, felt more isolated from Miranda. She was afraid of being the object of ridicule and chose to stay away. Miranda, on the other hand, couldn't understand why everyone was doing this to her. She wondered if it was because of her looks or her friendship with Lisa. Why couldn't she find a way to defend herself and respond to the bullying? She wanted revenge somehow, but she wasn't a violent girl, and ideas didn't come to mind. Thus, winter became a time of not only cold days, but also cold relationships at school. But even in this bleak environment, Miranda and Lisa continued to exist, struggling with ridicule and perseverance. In the morning, Miranda, as usual, woke up exactly on her alarm clock. It was hard for her to get out of bed on cold winter days. But the schoolgirl's responsibilities didn't wait. She slowly got up, stretched, and started her usual morning ritual. I washed my face, got dressed, made breakfast, and packed my things. There was already a thick shroud of snow outside, and the drifts reached her knees. Miranda knew she would have to walk through this blizzard to get to school. It was quiet outside, only the creaking of snow beneath her footsteps, and the wind that blew through her warm clothes were reminders that winter was approaching. On the way to school, Miranda thought about her best friends, Lisa. They had been inseparable since first grade and always walked to school together. But with winter coming, they rarely saw each other. Lisa tried to avoid meeting on the street so that Miranda wouldn't be subjected to ridicule and bullying from her classmates. And even though Miranda understood the reason for this aloofness, she was still sad. When Miranda finally reached the school, she was struck by the emptiness on the doorstep. Usually Lisa was already waiting for her here, and they would enter the school building together. But today the threshold was empty and Miranda felt lonely. She decided to walk to school alone. On the way, she heard taunts, felt papers flying at her feet and at her head. She tried to ignore it and just walked forward with a sad expression on her face. When Miranda finally entered the classroom, she saw Lisa sitting by the window and looking off into the distance. There were 3 notes on Miranda's desk. First, she read the note from Lisa, sorry for not meeting her on the doorstep in a hurry. Miranda felt relieved. But the other 2 notes caused her concern. One was from Mason, her classmate, and the other was from Nastya, a classmate. They said beware when leaving the school, and come back later. Miranda shifted her gaze from the notes to Lisa. Lisa wasn't looking at her, and Miranda realized that something was wrong. The notes had caused her to feel uneasy, and she didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear: she couldn't ignore the warnings in the notes. The class went on quietly as usual. Silence reigned in the classroom. The teacher was writing slowly on the blackboard. Miranda sat on the front row and concentrated, gazing into the textbook. She loved the subject, and she was trying to study hard. Her eyes were determined, and she was ready to answer the teacher's questions. Next to Miranda on the same front row sat Lisa. She too was looking ahead, but her gaze was blank, as if she was not seeing the class, but something far away and unattainable. There was no expression on her face. It was as if she was absent from this place and time. The teacher continued his story, but Miranda was already prepared for the answer. She knew the material and was waiting to be asked a question. The correct answers were rolling around in her head, and she was confident in her knowledge. Lisa, sitting next to her, did not participate in the lesson. Her thoughts were somewhere far away in the extracurricular room. She didn't listen to what the teacher was saying or see the formulas written on the blackboard. There was no place in her world for learning and knowledge. The lesson continued, but to Lisa it was just endless mumbling, carrying everything past her. She didn't want to learn, didn't want to think about learning. Her mind was occupied with something else, something important and mysterious. At the end of class, the teacher announced that there would be no homework for the next day. Miranda and Lisa gathered their things and, without a word, headed for the exit of the classroom to a whole class that was waiting for something interesting to happen. It looked strange. They walked past classmates who were whispering and laughing, but Miranda and Lisa paid no attention to them. Outside, a blizzard was waiting for them. The snow fell softly and covered the ground with a white and fluffy layer. The air was cool, fresh. Snowflakes flew in their faces, and Miranda and Lisa felt them melting on their skin. The snowstorm gave the street a special atmosphere. It was as if magic was happening right now. Lisa and Miranda walked slowly through the snowdrifts without hurrying, looking at every snowflake flying in their direction. They walked side by side, but each was deep in thought. Miranda thought about her family and her brother James. He was far away. He was in the army, and she hadn't seen him in years, but they kept in touch through letters and phone conversations. James had always been a great friend and mentor to her. He helped her with her studies and advice, and Miranda missed him very much. Lisa, looking ahead through the blizzard, pondered why she felt so alienated from the others. She didn't want to be part of this world where ridicule and bullying ruled. She longed for something more, something that was real and genuine. Miranda returned home after another hard day at school. She crossed the threshold of her house, feeling lethargic and tired in every movement. It was already starting to get dark outside, and her parents' house looked cozy and warm on this winter evening. After Miranda took off her school uniform and changed into comfortable home clothes, she didn't go straight to her homework as she usually did. Instead, she headed into the living room and sat in a cozy chair by the large window that overlooked the street. Outside the window was a winter fairy tale. Snow was slowly and quietly falling to the ground, forming fluffy drifts. Everything around was covered in a blanket of white, and the world seemed incredibly pure and unvirtuous. Miranda looked at this winter magic and felt the tension leave her body. The snowflakes continued to dance in the air like little angels bringing goodness and tranquility to the world. Winter was creating its magic, and Miranda was completely immersed in the moment. She closed her eyes to sink even deeper into this atmosphere. She wanted to feel a part of this natural beauty, to forget all her problems and worries. The snow was gently touching her face, and she felt it chilly, but it was a pleasant sensation. Suddenly, memories from her childhood surfaced in her mind. Back then, she often played outside with her parents. They would build snowmen and have real snowball fights. She was a happy girl then, and snow was her faithful companion. With each passing minute, Miranda was sinking deeper into her memories. She reflected on the days when her friendship with Lisa was real and unwavering. In her soul was born the hope of change, that they could regain what they had before. Winter, that mysterious season, seemed to promise that miracles could happen. Miranda sat silently by the window and thought about how to change her life, how to regain her friendship with Lisa. She felt that this snowy world gave her hope and strength for change. So she sat by the window, immersed in her thoughts, listening to the whispering snow and dreaming of what the coming of spring might bring. Gradually the night and the snow came early, sparkling, and the heat began to take on the mysterious hues of twilight. The shadows on the drifts grew longer, and the whole world seemed shrouded in an invisible veil of mystery. Miranda continued to sit at the window, looking out at this shimmering songs. Dusk in the distance heard the wind, rustling the branches of the trees, as if inviting a glimpse into the vast world of winter. Evening stars slowly appeared on the celestial sphere, adding extra mystery to this moment. On the street, the windows were already decorated with bright garlands, creating the atmosphere of the upcoming holidays. The light from the street lamps reflected off the snow, creating a shimmering glow. And Miranda felt like she was in a fairy tale. She was alone with this incredible beauty of the winter night, and it brought her peace. Below her windows, she could hear the distant sound of cars getting lost in the blizzard and a chorus of melodious voices singing Christmas songs. As the night grew darker, Miranda began to slowly make her way through her thoughts. She was reminded of the lessons she had repeatedly put aside, giving herself some time to think and relax. But now that the world outside had fallen into dusk, she knew it was time to return to her duties. The words of her parents, who always emphasized the importance of education and knowledge, echoed in her mind. She didn't want to disappoint them. And besides, learning was one way to get away from problems and unpleasant memories. Miranda got up from her chair and headed to her desk where her textbooks and notebooks were waiting. But even as she sat down to study, her thoughts still hovered somewhere in that winter night where snow and stars created magic. Finishing her lessons, Miranda settled into her bed. The wind was still blustering outside, and the snow continued to fall, covering the world with its soft blanket. To the sound of the wind and the blizzard, Miranda fell asleep, carrying with her the promise of a new day and the hope that things would soon change. The new year was slowly but surely approaching the small town where Miranda lived. On this day, the small town was transformed into a fairy tale place, decorated with lights and garland dresses. In the morning, Miranda awoke to the light streaming through the curtains into her room. Lazily pulled, she stared with a smile at the steely snow outside her window. The snowfall had passed during the night, and now blankets of snow were rolling all over nature. Miranda had always loved snow, and this first snow of the year made her mood even more festive. As she got out of bed, she felt the pleasant warmth of home. Her parents were already in the kitchen preparing breakfast, and the aroma of fresh pancakes filled the entire house. Miranda joined the family table and treated them to pancakes with jam. The parents smiled and exchanged plans for the day. Today was their day off, and the family was going to go to the holiday bazaar downtown to pick out gifts and enjoy the holiday atmosphere. After breakfast, Miranda went to her room and started choosing an outfit for the New Year's bazaar. She wanted to look especially bright and beautiful on this day. There were many options in her closet, but she decided to opt for the beautiful dress her grandmother had given her when she returned to the living room. Her parents cheered her approvingly, and they headed downtown with smiles. The streets were festooned with garlands, and the storefronts sparkled under the mixed decorations. People hurried about their business, picking up gifts and greetings. At the bazaar, Miranda and her family spent a lot of time choosing gifts for family and friends. They tasted hot pancakes with honey, plain mulled wine, enjoying the holiday atmosphere. A huge Christmas tree decorated with brightly colored balls and twinkling lights was set up in the main square of the town. In the evening, after returning home, the family gathered around the fireplace. The parents stoked the fire, and Miranda looked out the window where the snowfall was still continuing. Silence reigned outside, and it was a moment of complete peace and tranquility. Miranda lay down on the couch, tangled in the plaid, and began to read a book. It was getting darker outside the window, and the pleasant smell of the dinner her parents were preparing was spreading in the house. There came a moment when she forgot about everything in the world and completely immersed herself in the world of the book. The evening passed quietly and cozily. There was silence inside and outside. Miranda finished reading, put the book aside, and settled into bed. Her mood was great, and she fell asleep dreaming of the upcoming new year and all the events that awaited her. Miranda rose out of bed in the middle of the winter morning, her face lit up with anticipation of the new day. Outside the window was a true fairy tale. Everything was shrouded in snow, and every step on the snow made a distinctive crunching sound. The room smelled of freshly baked pancakes and jam that my mother was preparing. Breakfast was a real feast, pancakes and hot tea. Merry stories of my parents about how they used to spend winter vacations in their youth. The day after tomorrow, and Miranda, as always, started to get ready for school. She chose a beautiful school uniform that gave her confidence and carefully calculated her hair. All her textbooks, notebooks were neatly stacked in her backpack, and she was ready to start the day. Her mom handed her a thermos of hot cocoa for recess, and Miranda smiled gratefully. She walked out of the house and headed toward school, savoring the moment. The streets were covered in white snow, and the sun made it glisten, and despite the cold, the air was clean and illuminating. Miranda listened to her footsteps crunching through the snow and looked at the houses decorated with lights and garlands. When she arrived at school, she was greeted by her friend Lisa, who was also in a good mood. They discussed plans for the day and exchanged news. Her friend had a note suggesting that they meet up after school. This added a note of mystery to the day, and Miranda looked forward to the end of the school day to see what Lisa wanted to talk about. Miranda stood on the doorstep of the school, waiting for her friend Lisa. The winter day was quiet and cold, and every breath filled with a slight chill in the air. The snow fell slowly, like little crystal shimmers, and made a white blanket across the ground. Lisa, in her red wool hat and warm down jacket, she approached Miranda with a smile. Her eyes sparkled when she saw her friend. "Hi, Miranda," said Lisa, ready for a new adventure. Miranda answered her with a smile. She always enjoyed spending time with Lisa. Together, they experienced so many interesting moments. "Of course," Lisa replied Miranda, "the snow is so magical. Today maybe we'll sculpt a snowman." "That sounds great," agreed Lisa. So the two friends started their day enjoying the winter beauty. They took a walk through the park, leaving their footprints in the snow. In the distance, they noticed children playing snowballs, and with a smile, they decided to join in. However, despite the joyous day with Lisa, the shadows of recent events still hung in the air. The recent bullying and taunts from classmates. It wasn't easy to forget. Miranda and Lisa tried not to think about it, but the heavy burden still pressed on their friendship. After the outing, Miranda and Lisa returned home, and each spent the rest of the day thinking about past and future events. But in the evening, when they met again, the light of hope burned in the eyes of both girls. No unfavorable circumstance could destroy their friendship. Miranda began, "Lisa, I want to talk to you about something important. It's no secret that we're best friends, and together we've experienced so many moments of happiness and joy. But, as you know, I've had some difficult moments lately." Miranda listened attentively to her friend. She could see that something sad and heavy was hiding in her eyes. "There are rumors going around the school," Miranda continued, "Lisa, and I know you are noticing how the relationships in class are changing. I try to stay out of it, but sometimes it gets too hard." Miranda understood what Lisa was talking about. They had been inseparable friends for a long time, but lately things had been changing. The bullying from classmates was getting worse, and even Lisa, as the older and more popular girl, it was hard to deal with. But Miranda continued, "Lisa, I don't want our friendship to be the loss of my reputation. You've always been there for me, and I appreciate that more than anything. I remember everything we've been through together, and I wouldn't want to dissolve our friendship. But understand, if I'm friends with you, my classmates are bullying me too. I need to rebuild my reputation in class. I want to have a normal life and blend in with them. I'm sorry." Miranda smiled sadly at Lisa. She replied, "I will always be here for you. Nothing will be able to keep us apart, and together we will overcome all difficulties. Let's not let these rumors and bullying get in our way." Lisa looked thoughtfully at Miranda, as if a struggle was unfolding inside her between the desire to preserve her friendship and the fear of the rumors and bullying. Her eyes filled with tears, and she slowly said, "Miranda, you probably don't understand. I really want to end our friendship." Miranda shuddered in surprise at those words pierced her heart like a sharp needle. The smile disappeared from her face. It became painful. Tears started coming from behind her eyes, and she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why did Lisa whisper to Miranda, trying to hold back tears? "We're best friends. We're always together. Why do you want to end our friendship?" Lisa was in pain too, seeing how Miranda was reacting to her words. She shook her head slightly and muttered, "It's hard to explain. Miranda, I'm afraid of more ridicule, afraid of losing my place in the class. I don't know what to do." Miranda slowly lowered her head and her tears increased. She was hurt that her best friend was backing down, but she also felt compassion for Lisa, who was trapped between wanting to keep the friendship alive and fear of what would happen next. Miranda continued, "Lisa, please understand me. I don't want you to feel worse because of me. Maybe in time things will change, and we can be together again." With these words, Lisa turned and ran away, leaving Miranda standing in the snow with a broken heart. Miranda slowly walked home. Tears streamed down her face, and her heart was filled with bitterness and sadness. This day turned out to be a far cry from their fun snow adventure, and Miranda couldn't imagine how she would go on without her best friend. The next morning came again, shrouded in a gray shroud of sadness, which like a heavy cloak descended on Miranda's soul. Her dream was interrupted, and the moment of conversation with Lisa tormented her even in her sleep. It was as if invisible chains were clutching her heart. Waking up, Miranda already felt that this day was going to be particularly hard. The morning outside the window, slowly awakening from the winter sleep, the soft light of the sun shone through the curtains, casting light streaks on the walls of the room. Miranda rose from her bed as if to heave an invisible weight of her mind. But even the water seemed cold to her without a vital sadness, rolled around her like an invisible cloak that clung to her body and had no desire to come off. Breakfast was put on the table, but Miranda had no appetite. She ignored the sandwiches and the bowl of porridge as if she had lost interest in food. There was weariness in her eyes. Her face expressed indifference to the world around her rather than any emotion. On this day, the street was empty and quiet, as if nature itself understood her inner state and decided to keep silent. Under Miranda's feet, the snow crunched like 1,000,000 small, fragile crystals, and every step left a trace on the snow-white blanket. A blizzard rushed past passing cars, but Miranda didn't feel the cold wind on her skin and paid no attention to the fleeting moments of life around her. School was the same as it had always been. Rumors and ridicule were everywhere, and Miranda felt the gazes of her classmates fixed on her. As she entered the classroom, she noticed Lisa talking to her classmates. These conversations were accompanied by laughter and irony, and Miranda realized that her presence in the school was still an object of ridicule. It was like a stab to the heart. Miranda's eyes slid sadly toward Lisa, and she felt the bitter pain once again gripping her soul. She slowly and indifferently lowered herself to her seat, and instead of opening her textbook, her gaze froze on the window. Snowflakes slowly circled behind the glass, creating an illusion of weightlessness and tranquility that wasn't there inside. Miranda's in that quiet world. Outside the window, she saw the slow tango of snowflakes, as if each one was a gentle kiss of winter, yet fluffy covered the ground in their fragile crystal-clear forms. She saw a reflection of her own thoughts and experiences. The light blue light of the snowy day filtered into the classroom through the window, and the sun's rays seemed to stroke the surface of the lens table, leaving a warm trail. But that warmth did not reach her soul, which was shrouded in cold, disappointment, and grief. Outside the window, the play of snow and wind continued. Gentle flakes slowly descended towards the ground like fluffy cakes and flew down into the arms of winter. Winter was already covered with a layer of snow, as if she was lying in wait for new adventures. Forgetting her past worries, the wind whispered its stories quietly among the bare trees, and Miranda could only guess what it was telling. The world outside the window was slow and calm, as if it knew not the troubles and unrest that filled her heart. It was an oasis of peace in a world full of bustle and deceptively brightness. Miranda continued to stare out the window as if she were looking for answers to her own questions in this winter beauty. The bell rang, and that day the classroom was filled with a heavy atmosphere that seemed to muffle the sounds of the teacher's words. Miranda, the entire class just sat, shrouded in sadness, and longing. Her attention was far away in a world of her own reflection. Each moment seemed like an eternity, and she left her gaze to the laptop, on the screen of which meaningless numbers and letters fell. Her soul felt heavy and empty, as if a huge hole had been dug inside her, and she had fallen into it. Sounds from the textbook, the words of the teacher, the fumbling of pens, and the occasional laughter of classmates floated past her as if in another dimension. Her lessons lay indifferently on her desk, and she didn't react to the chaos around her. Those around her, especially those who had arranged the water and glue incident, were becoming invisible. Her steel walls of emotional defense seemed not just secure, but impenetrable. She didn't allow her emotions to come out, even if it was pain. But despite the outer peace, there were questions burning inside Miranda, and big ones. Why had Lisa decided to end their friendship? What had she done wrong? What could be done to make things go back? These questions spun around in her head like a wheel of fortune, but with no obvious answers. Each lesson was like a stone being added to the pile of her mental burden, but she couldn't let go of her thoughts of Lisa, couldn't stop thinking about the times they had been inseparable friends. On the way home on this frosty day, Miranda was literally being bombarded with snowballs. At first, she tried to dodge this mocking attack. But as time went by, her movements became more timid, and slowly the snowballs flew towards her from all directions, as if fired from the imaginary cannons of everyone around her. White light snowflakes lay on her clothes and hair. The rustling and squeaking snow under her feet greeted her every step, making it seem as if nature itself was participating in this attack. But Miranda continued walking silently and without any reaction to the taunts. The winter morning turned into a winter day, and the surroundings became quiet, as if nature too was holding its breath, watching this lone figure. Miranda slowly made her way forward, looking down as if each trail in front of her was assigned to somewhere far away. The snow seemed endless, and Miranda simply walked nowhere on an empty road with not a soul in sight. The snowfall incessantly invited sounds, and Miranda could only hear her own inner monologue, which seemed to be stuck on thinking about Lisa's words. Images of the scene flashed like faces in the air, but she couldn't gather her thoughts. The snow was still flying in her direction, but she was no longer reacting to it. She walked through that white shroud as if trying to pass through time and leave behind all the painful memories and doubts. When Miranda returned home, she felt the evening light streaming into her room, flooding its dark walls with a soft golden hue. This light filled her heart with warmth and joy, for it reminded her of her upcoming meeting with the closest person in the world, her brother James, with emotion and anticipation. Miranda picked up her smartphone and began typing messages for him. Her fingers glided lightly across the keys as if playing a snowy melody, filling each letter with her feelings. "Hi, James. How are you doing? I miss you." That's what her words sounded like, full of tenderness and anticipation. She pressed send and looked at the screen, eagerly waiting for a reply. Seconds seemed like an eternity as she waited. The first hour passed agonizingly, slowly, as if time had slowed its course to increase her anxiety. The next hour seemed even longer, and Miranda began to worry. Suddenly, her phone made a notification sound, and her heart took a leap. Frantically, she opened the message and her eyes drifted to the words written on the screen. "It's okay. Sis, how are you?" That was the reply from James. Miranda wondered. As usual, she decided to lie to her brother by texting normally. But it wasn't like that at all. She just didn't want to alarm him. Miranda gazed out into the vast, snow-covered landscape as she walked to school. There was an incredible calmness all around on this morning winter day, and it was as if all outside sounds were hushed, absorbed by the soft cover of snow. The trees from the mountains were beaming under the weight of their winter attire, and the roofs of the houses, as if adorned with diamonds, shone in the sunlight. Penetrating through the clouds, the snow fell slowly from the heavens, as if shimmering with emeralds, crystals, and Miranda couldn't help but marvel at this natural beauty. Winter was a magical season, and she knew that soon this magical landscape would disappear, giving way to the spring atmosphere. She began to daydream as if she herself would be a part of this fabulous winter scene. In her imagination, she blended with nature, as if becoming an integral part of it. It was at this moment, as she was deep in her reverie, that her silence was interrupted by a voice that was not friendly. It came back, and her heart was behind her again. Standing there was Mason, the main bully of the school, the person who hurt Miranda the most. He chuckled seeing her looking dreamily at the winter nature, and suddenly, like a lightning strike, Mason pushed her forcefully. Miranda lost her balance and fell to the snow. She felt the cold and wet through her thin layer of clothing, but her pain wasn't just physical. Much more, her heart was torn by the injustice and cruelty of this attack. With difficulty rising to her feet, Miranda tried to object, but her words were interrupted by the laughter of Mason and his friends. They took her backpack from her and, laughing, picked her up by her arms and legs. Miranda looked at them helplessly. Her heart pounded harder with fear. Suddenly, she was in the air and slowly realized that she was being thrown into a drift left by the snow after another snowstorm. The fall wasn't so hard. Miranda landed softly. But at that moment, as she lay in the snowdrift, there was no way she could have realized what was happening. Mason and his friends opened her briefcase and dumped all the contents onto the cold, snow-covered ground. Textbooks, pencils, and notebooks scattered all over the playground, like stars in the sky. Miranda looked at this chaos and powerlessly covered her face with her hands. Her soul was torn into many tiny fragments. Her dreams and hopes seemed to be blown away by the wind. At this moment, she did not care about the beauty of winter and fairy tales. She felt only the bitterness of betrayal and cruelty. Miranda remained sitting in the snowdrift, immersed in her own thoughts and emotions, as if in some gloomy void. The snow continued to fall in slow swirls, enveloping her world, its cold tenderness lifting a heavy sigh from her chest. But like frost, it froze in the air. A storm of varied feelings raged inside Miranda. She felt humiliation at what had happened, helplessness in front of those who had chosen to rain down their anger on her again and again. Her large hands, frozen from the snow, reminded her of the reality of what was happening. But the most important thing she felt, it was loneliness. Miranda, overcoming the heaviness within herself, gathered up the notebooks and textbooks of the snow-covered ground. Her fingers were wet with the risky cold, but she felt no discomfort. She was used to the cold by now, as well as the bitter taunts of her classmates. As she got up and headed towards the school, Miranda couldn't help but notice how the snowmen she had seen yesterday were now beginning to be covered in a layer of fresh snow. It was like a symbol of new beginnings, an opportunity to fix what had gone wrong. She paid no attention to the snow spears that periodically flew at her from her classmates. Those jokes and taunts had long since stopped hurting her. Miranda was stronger than her abusers could have imagined. As she approached the school, she was confronted by the surprised looks of her classmates, who apparently didn't expect her to return after what had happened. One of them joked that she wouldn't make it home. However, Miranda didn't pay any attention to them. She simply smiled and went on her way. She was determined to prove that despite all the difficulties, she would not give up. A familiar scene greeted her in class. Lisa was standing among her classmates and laughing as well. This time, Miranda didn't bother to weigh her words. Her friends didn't try to talk to her or change anything. She just sat down in her seat and tiredly began to do her homework, as if she had fallen into the calm sea of classes. She tried to escape into the world of knowledge and temporarily forget about outside gatherings. As the lessons progressed, Miranda felt the fatigue come over her. Her eyes began to close on their own, and slowly but inevitably, she started for the demanding textbook, began to blend into the world of her own thoughts and dreams. So Miranda, who had survived the morning bullying and hopes for a bright future, fell asleep for lessons, forgetting for a while about what was around her, and going into a world of her own thoughts and hopes. Miranda fell asleep at school. Her head slumped on her desk, and sleep slowly but inevitably engulfed her in a dream world where reality intertwined with fantasy. She found herself back in the same place among her classmates, including Lisa. They were smiling, genuinely pleased by her presence, as if there had never been any disagreements or conflicts. The happy moments continued in her dream. Together with her friends and Lisa, they were running through snowy fields, catching snowflakes on their tongues and laughing until they fell. Miranda felt the warmth and helpless joy she missed so much in real life. When the dream transported her home, her brother was already waiting impatiently for her. They embraced, and Miranda felt the immense love and support he had always given her. These were the moments of happiness that Miranda craved so much in real life. But reality caught up with her again. The bell for recess sounded, and she woke up, realizing that it was only a dream. She felt the living warmth being replaced by the cold of reality, and a desolation engulfed her. Miranda noticed that something was giving her discomfort in her head. She ran her hand through her hair and found the cause of her discomfort. There was gum in her hair. The mixed snow and cold wind gave this gum an unsightly look. It was another ridiculous act of bullying that Miranda struggled to ignore. Gathering her thoughts, she slowly and carefully removed the gum from her hair, feeling the stares of her classmates. Back to real life, Miranda thought about how much her dreams and desires were affecting her. She decided that she had to find a way to resolve her conflict with Lisa and regain her lost relationship, to experience some happiness and warmth. Even in reality, Miranda felt that this moment was crucial. She decided to put all her heart and feelings into this letter to convey to Lisa the sincerity of her words. Before she started writing, Miranda looked out the window where the spring sun was already beginning to slowly creep through the dense clouds. Her room was filled with bright rays of light, and it gave everything a special atmosphere. Miranda took a piece of paper and carefully spread it out in front of her. On the table, her hand clenched to the pen, as if ready to express everything that tormented her. She began to write. "Dear Lisa, I can't help but speak of what happened between us. It was like storm clouds opening our friendship, and I don't want it to tear us apart." With every word, Miranda put a piece of her soul into the letter. Her feelings were so vivid that she felt as if every letter on the paper was written with her heart. She continued, "We have always been each other's rock, and I can't imagine my life without our friendship. Please, let's talk and work things out. We can overcome any difficulties if we are together." Miranda finished the letter and looked at it hopefully. She was sure that Lisa would understand and respond to this gesture. Hope and faith in the restoration of their friendship filled her heart, and Miranda hoped that soon they would be able to settle all their misunderstandings and enjoy their inexpressible friendship again. Miranda, as she put the letter in her backpack, suddenly felt her heart beat harder. It was a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She wanted Lisa to receive the letter and understand her sincere feelings, but at the same time she was afraid of what might happen next. Thinking back to the past incident with Mason and his friends, Miranda felt a small shiver. She knew that this guy, the school's biggest bully, wouldn't miss a chance to bully. Her backpack seemed to her now like some kind of treasure that she must protect at all costs. Walking through the school hallways, Miranda held her backpack especially tightly. The stares of her classmates, resentment, and ridicule pierced her, but she tried to ignore them. The words from the letter were playing in her head, and that gave her the strength to move forward. When she walked into the classroom, Lisa was already standing there, talking to her classmates. Miranda felt a prick, bitter and sad. They were inseparable friends, and now seeing Lisa socializing with those who bullied Miranda was like a stab in the heart. Miranda sat silently in her seat and lowered her eyes. Her thoughts were centered on the letter and on the hope that she could turn things around. At that moment, she felt someone throwing a paper ball at her. She looked up and saw Mason and his friends giggling, pointing at her. She didn't respond, was too consumed with her thoughts and her desire to regain her friendship with Lisa. Miranda carefully placed the note in Lisa's briefcase, careful not to let anyone notice her actions. She was careful not to give anything away so that no one would guess her intentions. It was like an operation to save their friendship, or she knew she had to proceed with caution. Then the next class started, and Miranda listened attentively to the teacher, trying to suppress her anxiety and impatience. Time stretched slowly, as if studying had become something unimportant to her, because all her attention was focused on the note in Lisa's briefcase. When finally the bell for recess rang, Miranda almost rushed to the briefcase to see if the note was still there. Seeing that Lisa's briefcase was not open, she breathed a sigh of relief. All that was left was to wait until Lisa got home and discovered the note. There was a mixture of hope and anxiety on Miranda's mind, fighting for supremacy. She hoped that Lisa would read the note and that it would help them regain their old friendship. At the same time, she was worried about her friends' possible reactions. What if Lisa rejected the peace offering? Miranda knew that the only thing left to do was wait. There were more classes ahead, and the day promised to be long. But she was willing to wait out any hardship if it would help them regain their friendship. The note was like a beacon in a dark ocean of uncertainty, and she trusted that it would work and bring them to the shore of peaceful harmony. Miranda walked home. Every step was filled with anticipation and impatience. It was as if time was too short to wait for Lisa's answer. The snow beneath her feet crunched, and a chill permeated the air. But Miranda wasn't even aware of her surroundings. Her mind was filled with only one thought, a response to the note she had just handed to her friend. The note was neatly folded inside the envelope, and on it Miranda drew a sun as a symbol of hope. She decided to waste no time and act quickly to possibly repair her friendship with Lisa. At home, Miranda looked forward to the next day. It seemed that every minute stretched like an hour and every hour like a day. Her inner world was completely subordinated to the anticipation, and she could not take her mind off how Lisa would respond. Studies, routine worries, and conversations with her parents passed Miranda by. She was consumed with only one question: how they would communicate with Lisa in the future, how to regain the lost trust and close friendship. Toward the end of the day, Miranda began to worry that Lisa might ignore her note, or worse, reject the reunion proposal. These thoughts filled her heart with anxiety, but she decided to give it a chance, even if it might bring pain. The time tonight stretched slowly and unbelievably long. Miranda went to bed with the hope of a bright tomorrow morning, the hope that Lisa's answer would bring them both joy and restore their connection. She fell asleep imagining scenarios of possible developments. Optimism and fear struggled inside her soul, but hope never left her heart. Miranda walked to school along the usual route, but her mind was completely out of the present moment. She thought deeply about what to write in response to the note she had given Lisa yesterday. The lines of the message in her backpack seemed to loom, warning of an impending decision. It seemed to her that so many things depended on that answer. Their friendship, her future at school, and even her own well-being. Thoughts and answer options literally competed in her head. The first option was so pessimistic that she couldn't even seriously consider it. It was the option of refusing to reconnect, like a wall behind which bitterness and resentment lurked. She imagined writing a short and stern message announcing her decision to keep her distance, but every time she thought of that option, her heart shrank with sadness and sorrow, having almost a photographic memory. Miranda remembered all the moments of their friendship that were filled with joy and laughter. Memories of sharing secrets and experiencing their first girl problems seemed to rush through her mind like lightning in a storm. The second option was more optimistic, but also scary. She could offer Lisa to rebuild their friendship as if nothing had happened. She wanted to believe that Lisa's note would evoke feelings as warm and joyful as those in herself. She dreamed of them being best friends again, as if nothing had ever separated them. However, she realized that going back to the past was impossible, and that even if Lisa agreed to restore their friendship, something would forever change in their relationship. The reality was much more complicated than she had realized. Miranda realized that Lisa's answer could be anything, and despite her hopes, she couldn't predict how things would turn out. She had to fight with herself not to go to extremes. On the one hand, to preserve her honor and dignity. On the other, to get back the friend she had known and loved for so long. Her dreams and fears accompanied her all the way to school. She walked, forgetting about the cold and snow, about the feelings of others, because her mind was fully occupied with waiting for a reply from her friend. It was a day full of expectation and uncertainty, and Miranda couldn't wait to find out what turn their friendship would take. Miranda was anxiously awaiting the moment when her friend Lisa would return to school. She knew that Lisa had to read her note and perhaps send a reply. Every second seemed interminably long, and her heart was beating so fast she thought it would snap. Finally, the long-awaited moment came. The classroom door creaked open, and Lisa appeared in it. Her gaze met Miranda's, and at the same moment Miranda's heart sank. They exchanged smiles, and Lisa moved closer to Miranda. Lisa handed Miranda a small envelope. Inside it was a note on which were her words of response to those expectations. Miranda took the envelope and clutched it to her chest, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. With trepidation and excitement, Miranda opened the envelope and began to read the letters on the paper as if chewing. Revealing her expectations and hopes, her eyes glided over the lines, and she was immersed in the world her friend had created. It read, "Dear Miranda, thank you for your letter. Here is my reply. I don't mind restoring our friendship." Miranda's eyes sparkled with joy. She read on, "I had already had a fight with my classmates, and when I told you that it was time for us to stop communicating, I regretted it." Miranda's heart was racing. She read on, "I wanted to come over and tell you let's be friends again like before, but I couldn't find the words." Miranda was understanding. She read on, "But I'm leaving for another city, day after tomorrow for good. I can't even tell you how sorry I am that this is how it happened. All these years of our friendship have been incredible, and I cherish every moment I've spent by your side. I want you to know that you will always be my best friend, and nothing can erase our memories. May the distance not separate us forever. We will always be able to stay in touch and see each other whenever we get the chance. You will remain for me the same Miranda with whom I had so many unforgettable moments." Miranda finished the last lines, and tears ran down her cheeks. She was overcome with emotion, and she realized how important she was to Lisa. They had really been through a lot together, and now that parting moment was approaching. Miranda finished reading and folded the note carefully, tucking it back into the envelope. She couldn't help but share her feelings with Lisa, even if it was difficult. Miranda got up from her seat and hugged Lisa tightly goodbye, and Lisa hugged her. Papers flew into them, but they didn't care. Spring came slowly, as if awakening from winter hibernation. At the beginning of this magical period, nature was still hiding its treasures under a layer of snow and ice, but day by day the sun grew brighter, and its warm rays began to dissolve the shackles and the icy rain too. The first signs of the coming of spring were manifested in the mysterious gleam of the water in the streams that were being freed from the winter ice. The quiet sound of the flowing water filled the air with freshness and the promise of new life. Only small patches of snow cover remained on the clear slopes, like islands in a sea of spring drops. As soon as the first snowflakes melted, the ground beneath them began to blossom, the first sprouts of spring flowers, the true messengers of warmth, broke through. Crocus and tulips and daffodils came out into the light and created bright colors against the still gray nature. It was like a small miracle that reminded that life was returning after a long winter. With the coming of spring, animal life was also deciding. Birds were returning from the south, humming their songs as a sign of welcome. Their voices filled the air with joy and were like personal invitations to the spring ball of nature. One could hear the flitting of sparrows and starlings and the melodious songs of thrushes. Miranda was eagerly awaiting the arrival of her brother. He was very close to her, and she happily recalled their childhood spent together. She dreamed of how they would spend their time when he finally arrived. Together, they could go to the park, walk around the city, make picnics in the open air. And those were the best moments of her life. The spring breeze brought the scent of fresh earth and open loaves. This aroma filled the sense of smell and soul, as if promising new beginnings and possibilities. The days grew longer, and each evening brought beautiful sunsets, coloring the sky with orange and pink hues. A real metamorphosis was taking place in the streets of the city. People were going outside, leaving the warm shelter of their homes and offices. Smiles became brighter, their frowning faces transformed from under the influence of sunlight. Children were playing in the park, running through puddles and shouting merrily. Evening walks became longer and more enjoyable. With the arrival of spring, Miranda felt a new hope and energy awakening in her heart. Her whole life was filled with bright colors and beautiful moments. She saw in this season the promise of new possibilities and hoped for a fresh start in everything she did. Spring was a time of renewal and inspiration, and Miranda looked forward to what this period in her life would bring. Spring came into Miranda's life like a long-awaited angel of salvation after a long winter. This time period of transition from snowfall to green, all the trees and bright colors, was a source of incredible joy and optimism for her. Every morning, waking up in her cozy bed, Miranda saw the sunlight streaming through her window as if sounding a call to new adventures. The spring morning smelled fresh in the air, and the birdsong provided a stunning backdrop. To start the day, Miranda woke up and felt the breeze wafting into her room with the sense of blooming flowers and earth. Just freed from the snow, she would open the window and sigh that sweet aroma, as if filling her lungs with spring energy and cheerfulness. It was a perfect spring morning outside. The sky was clear and blue, without the heavy clouds that so often covered the sun in winter. The first rays of morning light gently touched the trees, revealing their luscious leaves and creating a play of light and shadow on the ground. It was the nature of the budding of new life, and Miranda, looking at this miracle, could not help but smile. Her days passed under the sign of this joyous change. She walked in the park, enjoying the fragrance of flowers and the concert of birds. Every time she stopped and closed her eyes, it seemed to her that she was part of this marvelous nature that was waking up from its winter sleep. However, this idyllic scenery was disturbed by her encounters with Mason the school bully, who constantly spoiled Miranda's mood instead of the joy and inspiration that spring brought. He brought with him destruction and bitterness. Every meeting they had became a test for Miranda, and she had to find the strength to stand up to this sailor. So one evening, as the day was coming to an end, Mason and his friends decided to attack Miranda again. It was away from her house, where no one could see what was going on. They stole behind her like dark ghosts and suddenly attacked her like crows attacking their prey. Mason stood out among his friends, ferocity and cold-bloodedness. Abruptly, he pushed Miranda into a muddy earthen puddle. Her body, suddenly devoid of support, fell into the cold water and splashing mud of Abdallah. Her bitter smile played on his face as if he had achieved some kind of victory. Miranda lay in the puddle, feeling the mud penetrating her clothes, leaving marks of shame on them. There were tears in her eyes, not from physical pain, but from humiliation and powerlessness. Mason and his friends seemed intent on extinguishing the bright spring joy in her heart. But Miranda was not about to let this darkness crush her. For spring, all its mighty beauty was with her like a protector. A time of improvement and rebirth, overcoming even the darkest moments. Miranda walked slowly down the road home, permeated with fatigue and frustration. The dirt on her clothes and shoes did nothing to improve her mood. Her hair was ear-swept and messy, and her face expressed mixed emotions from hurt and anger to bitterness and determination. Approaching the house, Miranda breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that she could now take refuge in her room and stay safe from Mason and his gang. But at the same time, she realized that this incident would not go unnoticed, and she would have to tell their parents something. The door to the house slowly creaked open as Miranda stepped inside. Her mother, a young woman with kind eyes, stood at the stove preparing dinner. The smell of fresh vegetables and meat filled the entire kitchen. At that moment, the kitchen was filled with warmth and cozy, but Miranda could not enjoy this atmosphere. Miranda's father, a slim and gray-haired man, was sitting at the table in the living room reading a newspaper. He was focused on his thoughts and paid no attention to his daughter's return. Miranda's parents had no idea of the ordeal she had gone through on her way home today. It seemed to them that their daughter had a normal day at school, and they were waiting to hear her talk about her classes. Miranda decided not to bother them with an idiotic story about how she had gotten broody and fallen in a puddle. Instead, she quietly walked past them and headed to her room. Her parents, hearing the sound of her from the opening door, exchanged quiet glances. In her room, Miranda took off her dirty clothes and put them in the washing machine. She wanted to get rid of this humiliation that Mason and his friends had inflicted on her. She then turned on the shower and stood tweaking the water, trying to wash away not only the dirt, but also the anxiety she felt. Soon Miranda stepped out of the shower and dressed in clean clothes. Her thoughts were filled with determination. She realized that this incident was just a temporary hindrance on her path to a bright future. After graduation, she would go far away from here, from Mason and all that negative energy. Sitting by the window in her room, Miranda could feel the spring breeze caressing her face. Times of change were coming, and she was ready to meet them with open arms. Miranda was a strong girl, and nothing could take away her belief in her own path. Thankfully and successfully, the day Miranda's brother James finally arrived was a very special day for her. Ever since the morning, Miranda had been excited. She knew it would be a meeting of joy and warmth. After all, long-awaited reunions with family members always bring joy and comfort. Miranda had even prepared a few gifts for James. She chose them with great care, trying to please her brother and make this day unforgettable. There were small packages on the table, neatly decorated with brightly colored ribbon. Miranda hoped her brother would appreciate her effort and attention. When James finally arrived, he was greeted with joyful hugs and warm words. Mom and Dad, happy to have their son back, invited him into the house. James was smiling and joking. He, too, missed home and family. Saturday was special. It was the kind of day to relax and enjoy time with family. Miranda invited her brother to come into her room. She wanted to share something very important and personal with him. In a room filled with warm sunlight, Miranda felt safe again. She sat James on the bed and started telling him stories about Mason, Lisa's school, and classmates. It took about an hour. Miranda shared all of her experiences, describing every detail of what was happening. James listened with great amazement. His sister seemed so small and fragile, But now he recognized that she was coping with many difficulties, and despite everything, remained strong. In his eyes, Miranda had become even more important and close to him. Anger and resentment for what was happening to her slowly built up inside James. When the story ended, there was silence in the room. James was silent for a long time, digesting all the information he had just heard. Then he stood up, went to his sister and hugged her tightly. "Miranda, I promise that no one can hurt you anymore. We will solve this problem together," he said, quietly and firmly. Miranda smiled, feeling that now she had not only a support, but also a protector. This day was the beginning of a new phase in their relationship, and Miranda felt that she was no longer alone in her struggles. The next morning, Miranda walked to school, accompanied by her brother James. She didn't hear word for word what her brother said along the way. But that wasn't really important. What mattered was that he was there for her, that she no longer had to cope alone. Somehow, things were starting to get better. She couldn't believe her eyes. No one was picking on her anymore. No one was bullying or humiliating her. Suddenly, school was a place where she wasn't so scared and hurt. And the most important thing that happened was that Mason, the main bully of the school, came up to Miranda and apologized. His words sounded sincere, and Miranda felt that he really understood that he had treated her unfairly and cruelly. The next morning, when Miranda arrived at the school, Mason was gone. Miranda was surprised, but had no idea what was behind his disappearance. And brother James seemed to know more. "What happened? Where's Mason?" Miranda asked. James smiled enigmatically. "A military secret. Little sister," he answered, and his eyes sparkled with laughter. Miranda was dumbfounded. What could have happened to make Mason disappear so suddenly? She realized her brother was joking, but the mystery of this situation was quite fascinating. Anyway, Miranda felt that a big change had taken place in her life. She was no longer afraid to go to school because her brother's support was waiting for her there, and even an apology from the bully Mason. New horizons and opportunities spread out before her, and she was ready to explore them. Miranda successfully graduated from high school with honors, proving to everyone and first of all to herself that she is capable of more than just surviving in an environment of rude classmates. Growing up has transformed her, adding beauty and confidence to her face. Her facial features became more expressive. Her eyes shone brighter, and a smile rarely left her lips. After successfully graduating from high school, Miranda enrolled in the best university in the city, realizing her dream of getting a quality education and creating a bright future for herself. The university years were filled with new knowledge and opportunities. Miranda proved herself as a student who could not only study well, but also actively participate in the extracurricular life of the university. Her days were filled with lectures, seminars, research, and socializing with like-minded people. She made loyal friends who supported her in all her endeavors. Miranda was active in student organizations and clubs. She strived to explore all aspects of her personality. Miranda also sometimes found solace and distraction in art. Drawing and music allowed her to express her emotions and thoughts in a creative way. It was her personal way of dealing with the tensions and stresses of university life. One day, when Miranda decided to take a walk through the corridors of the university, she saw a face that was very familiar to her. The first thing she thought was that it could be one of her classmates who might have gone to the same university. The girl was standing there looking at her phone. Apparently, she was busy. Miranda thought it was her old friend Lisa. Doubts crept into her mind. It really could have been Lisa. It had been so long since they had seen each other that Miranda had even forgotten what her friend looked like. She decided not to wait and approached the girl, asking hello. "And we haven't met?" The girl looked at Miranda with some bewilderment. She replied, "I don't think so." Miranda then asked her what her name was, and the girl answered, "My name is Lisa." Miranda squinted slightly, trying to recognize her in that face. It was the same Lisa they had studied together for years. She shook her head. "I can't believe my eyes." Miranda's small tears flowed and all the memories flashed before her. The snowman, the struggles with classmates, the notes, the journey together. "And my name is Miranda," answered Miranda, through tears. "Have you changed so much?" Lisa whispered with sadness and joy in her voice. Subscribe and click the bell.
The cozy, spacious kitchen was lit by the morning light. Adriana sat at the table, looking at her husband, then at her breakfast. She had the infamous oatmeal with berries again, which was making her sick. But she couldn't give up that breakfast, because there was no other breakfast in sight. And if she wanted to lose a couple of pounds, she had to sacrifice tasty food. Adriana pushed the small jar away from her, and now she was looking at her husband with her hands on her head. "You know, I think I should go on this business trip. The boss says that soon she is leaving us, which means that her place will become vacant. Can you imagine if I become vice director?" said the husband with a smile. "Yes, that would be good," said Adriana. She didn't listen to her husband, and there were plenty of problems without him. The more time they spent together, the more she noticed that in fact the feelings between them had long since cooled down. She had chosen him not with her heart, but with her head. She kept thinking, "We'll get along." Her mother kept repeating that it is necessary to choose a husband not for love. And in the end, what happened? In the end, she sits in the kitchen and feels that between her and her husband there is a gap. Adriana was sure that her husband realized it too. "Do you think I should take warm clothes?" the husband asked. Adriana looked at him. Ethan realized that she was not listening to him at all. "Were you even listening to me? I'm saying the weather changes all the time. Should we take warm clothes?" Ethan asked again. "I'm getting annoyed." "Theme, how old are you? Why have you learned to make your own decisions? I'm not your mom. Can you already decide for yourself whether to bring a sweater or not?" Through Adriana irritated. She left the kitchen, deciding to go without breakfast today. She went to the bathroom to put on makeup, to clean herself up before work. It was a job she hated too. Who would have thought that the very Adriana who had been prophesied to have a prosperous future was now forced to scrape by from paycheck to paycheck? She spent most of her income on her own appearance. For Adriana, there was nothing worse than growing old in her head. She was constantly thinking about what to do next, how to change her life, what to do with work and money. But every time such thoughts ended up with absolutely nothing. "What's going on with you lately?" "Well, you've been taking everything in stride," Ethan said, stepping into the bathroom. Adriana rolled her eyes defiantly so he could see how annoyed she was. But Ethan apparently wasn't going to back down. "Can we talk normally, in case you haven't noticed? You and I are still husband and wife," Ethan said. "Yeah, the subject is on paper. You and I haven't lived as husband and wife for a long time. Neighbors who sleep together periodically. That's about it. You've been acting like just a neighbor for a bunch of time now, not my man," said Adriana. "Here we go," Ethan said, gritted through his teeth. "That's it. Subject. This is the end of our conversations with you. Don't tell me I'm acting weird. I've tried many times to repair our relationship, but it's never worked out well. Now let it all fall apart," Adriana said. She put her mascara, mirror, and powder in her bag, and then went out into the living room. Adriana changed her clothes and hung around the mirror. Her husband walked past her defiantly, as if not noticing her. He could have said some compliments to soften the situation, but he didn't need to. Adriana went outside, went downstairs, got into the car, and drove to work. Once she was in the office, things got a little easier. Her job was boring as hell, but there wasn't much of a choice right now. Adriana thought more and more about getting a divorce, moving to another city, building a career. "Adriana, why aren't you wearing a face?" a coworker asked. David smiled, but Adriana cringed, a grimace of displeasure. "I looked in the mirror this morning. Was the face still there?" She cut him off. David realized that there would be no fun and flirting today. He went to work, and Adriana looked at the monitor. When the boss walked in, Adriana didn't pay any attention to him, but there was another man walking next to the boss. Adriana's mouth dropped open in shock. She couldn't believe that she was seeing a ghost from her past again. He was smiling broadly. He seemed to have not changed at all since that time. It felt as if she was back to the time when she was immensely happy. "Colleagues, I'd like to introduce you to our new department head. Meet Kevin," said the boss with pride. "Brought him in, so please respect my choice." Everyone began to meet the department head. Adriana was still in shock, couldn't take her eyes off him. Is everything going back to the way it was? This is the chance fate is giving her. I hope we can work together, Kevin said with a dazzling smile. All right, there's nothing to talk about. Who's in charge of the projects? Yeah, I can see that. Now you're having coffee, get back to work. Come back to my office. We'll decide what we're prioritizing right now. One at a time. I'm gonna go over all your tasks today. Wow, right off the bat. The boss laughed. Okay, I'll leave you to your work. Adriana, who had no idea how to react, ran to the bathroom. She rested both hands on the icy sink, leaning her forehead against the glass. It was hard for her to make any sense at all right now. How could she see him here after all these years? Had he really come back to find her again? Adriana was sure he didn't even recognize her. Apparently, she had gotten too pretty. As if mesmerized, she stared at her own reflection. She looked the same as before. The tiny wrinkles were invisible. Adriana felt a lump grow in her throat. She quickly typed a message to her friend that she needed to meet urgently after work. Adriana barely sat through the rest of the workday, and when finally released from the clutches of work, she rushed to her car. The young woman tried to avoid all the traffic to come to her favorite coffee shop. As soon as she left the car in the parking lot, she entered a cozy, bright room, decorated in permanent colors. It made her feel better. Adriana, what's wrong? Wendy asked in astonishment, immediately entering after her. Apparently, she was worried about Adriana's rambling message. 2. How are you, please? Adriana said as the waitress approached them. They took their favorite table by the window. On the windowsill was a bouquet of artificial lavender that looked like a live one. Pretty soon, 2 tall glass goblets with a straw appeared in front of them. There was a pleasant pink aroma. Adriana took a few sips. Wendy gave her a chance to gather her strength before speaking up. But that crazy look and totally disliked it. Remember when I used to date Kevin? God, the one I just lost my head over. Remember? Adriana asked. Of course I remember. When he left, did you lose your mind? You cried all day long. They almost put you in a mental institution. I'm not talking about how sick your relationship was. He was just using you and you were dusting him off. Wendy cut her off sharply. Adriana brushed it off, as if none of this meant anything. It was as if she were trying to forget all the bad things she'd had with Kevin. Adriana, as if by magic. She could only see the good in their past. Wendy was the only one who was open-minded and saw all the flaws that were literally on the surface. Don't tell me you're going to get back together with him. He left you for his career. At least you pulled yourself together. You got married. Jesus, Adriana. Don't tell me Wendy started, but the young woman interrupted her before she could finish. Oh, stop complaining. I'm a big girl. I can handle my own problems. Before I could even tell you about it, you were all over me. Don't forget Wendy. You're not my mom. She cut her off. Wendy now waved it off. Apparently, she realized that talking to her friend on the subject was completely useless. Adriana herself took the gesture as a surrender. Imagine today the boss comes in and says, "Here is your new department head." I look over and it's Kevin. He hasn't changed at all. Can you imagine how annoying that is? He wouldn't even look at me. Can you believe it? Adriana resented him. He was on his knees begging me for forgiveness, and now he just pretended as if I didn't exist at all. Adriana, how many years has it been? 5 years at least. You've been seeing someone else in that time. Married Ethan. And what do you still care about some Kevin who's messing with your head? Wendy asked. Wendy had a look as if she were totally disappointed in her friend. You remember how much I loved him. I've never felt that way in my life. Wendy and I haven't had a relationship for a long time. We live like roommates. We only sleep together periodically for convenience. So I just want to try and get it back, Adriana said. Adriana, come to your senses. What's going on in your head? A herring in a barrel? Are you out of your mind? I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm gonna hear you say all this crazy stuff. You were out of your mind the other day. Do you want it to happen again? Wendy asked in amazement. You're my friend. You're supposed to support me. Adriana exclaimed indignantly. I'm also supposed to keep you from doing something stupid. I thought you'd grown up. You want to jump on the wagon that will take you to the asylum. Wendy barked insistently. Adriana was shocked that her friend did not support her. Wendy was absolutely disappointed in her friend's action. They both tried to change the topic of conversation, so as not to get into an argument out of thin air. But I think she tried to talk her friend out of it more than once, because she knew that this situation would end in a real disaster. Adriana arrived home that day completely confused. On the one hand, she wanted to feel again all the emotions that she had in her relationship with Kevin. On the other hand, she knew that Wendy was right and that this train was going to take her to a mental institution. The relationship was truly sick. The emotional swings were driving her crazy. But now, as time passed, Adriana was sure that it was better than what she had with Ethan. Ethan himself seemed to sense the change in his wife. He asked her leading questions, but Adriana shook her head negatively, trying to concentrate on making decisions. Why don't you explain what's going on? I realize you and I had a fight. So now you can't talk to me? You don't seem like yourself today, Ethan said. But biting your elbows, Ethan, your ear, or what did you think I was going to personally run around you? No, I'm done. I'm not clinging to this relationship anymore. In fact, I think we should probably get a divorce soon, she said. That was the first time Adriana had ever talked about divorce. He didn't believe her at all. Ethan laughed out loud, which just put her in a stupor. She looked at him and a silly, unnatural grin appeared on her face. Adriana didn't know how to react to Ethan's laughter. What divorce? Are you out of your mind? Everyone fights. It happens. What are we going to do? Get a divorce? Asked Ethan, who really didn't believe her words. Especially we are not 20 years old to run back and forth to the registry office. Everybody's married. Let's keep the family together. They're threatening divorce. How silly is that? I'm not threatening. It's a topic. I'm seriously saying that you and I have grown cold for a long time. We should probably get a divorce. What's the point of us living under the same roof? If we're not a family anyway? Adriana asked. Ethan waved her away. It made her even more stunned. The young woman looked at her husband and didn't understand why he didn't take her words seriously at all. Ethan laughed again, haha. You made up the divorce too. Are you going to threaten me with divorce like all these hysterics? Adriana didn't answer him anything else. She doesn't want to believe him. Well, to hell with him. He won't get his way anyway. That night, the young woman decided to spend the night alone. Her husband, who was still laughing at her antics with no problem, lay on the couch and played video games until almost morning. It took Adriana a long time to fall asleep. In the morning, she felt wrecked. She put almost under her eyes, waiting for the bears to disappear. Had to get up early to clean herself up. How are you getting ready for your date? Said Ethan with a chuckle. Adriana did not bother to answer her husband. She got ready, drove to work, and really looked much better than usual. Her coworkers remarked that she looked great. They even thought it was her birthday. Adriana, how are you looking today? Let me ask you out, said Harriton near the coffee machine. Call your wife, parried Adriana with a smile. My wife to you as to Mars. Shall we go? He asked again and laughed. The women who also worked in the office. And clearly such jokes were not appreciated. Adriana was not going to flirt with colleagues, and certainly not with a married man. Harriton didn't interest her in any way at all. She took the papers, knocked on Kevin's office door, and then entered. But hi. I knew there was more to you today. Looks like Adriana. After all these years, you haven't changed a bit. That's too bad, Kevin said. Adriana stared at him, not understanding why he was suddenly expressing regret. She put the papers on the table as if she had come just for the report. You saw that your scores are worse than everyone else's. If this keeps up, you and I are going to have to say goodbye, Kevin said, looking through the papers. Can you not pretend like we're strangers to each other? She asked. Kevin looked away from the papers, now looking intently at her face. She felt uncomfortable. Adriana felt out of place. It was uncomfortable. Why was he staring at her like that all of a sudden? There was no tenderness or sensuality in his gaze. It was dry disappointment and longing. Adriana, let me get this straight with you. I'm your boss. This is where you and I are gonna stop. Being degenerate doesn't get you anything. You're gonna work the same way you're working now. I will fire you, he said. Adriana Rose sat down in the chair beside him and playfully placed her shoe on the chair. She thought he wouldn't hold back, rushed to kiss her like he had before. But Kevin did something she had not expected at all. The man leaned back in his chair, looked her over from head to toe, and then burst into full-throated laughter. Her husband laughed at her yesterday. Laughing today, Kevin laughed. Are you out of your mind? What the hell do I need you for? Kevin exclaimed, and he laughed even louder. Adriana even had tears in his eyes. We were almost teenagers. At least you were. I thought you'd wised up in that time too, and you're still just as stupid. Adriana slid off the table and stared intently into the eyes of the man she had once loved madly. She had never imagined that it would be so difficult to rebuild a relationship with him. I don't consider you at all. I realize you're just a shadow of your past, nothing more. Yeah, if I could turn back time, I would never have a relationship with you. You've drained me of so much blood. Oh my gosh, said Kevin, adjusting his shirt. We were so good together. Do you think I've forgotten about everything? She asked, frantically trying to find the words. Adriana held back tears of resentment with all her might. His legs began to tremble. His voice too. Kevin looked at her with a twinge of regret. Adriana, go to work, for God's sake. We're adults with families and responsibilities. There's no time for games right now. I don't need you, I don't need you. As a woman, I get it. Go to work. Leave me alone, Kevin said, pointing her to the door. Adriana pouted her lips like a child feeling monstrous resentment and disappointment. But strangely enough, didn't back down from her plan for a second. She was going to get him, and she would do it by any means necessary. Exactly a day later, Adriana has already made the first attempts to establish relations with Kevin. But her action could hardly be called expedient. Together with a friend who decided to support her, they drove 400 kilometers to reach some aunt. Adriana had found her contacts online and had high hopes for her. Adriana, I think you're starting to go crazy again, said Wendy. They were sitting in an endless line, and the hallway was stuffy, even though the windows were open. Some went in the door, some came out in tears. Some came out absolutely happy, literally glowing, anticipating the future. Adriana jerked her foot, attracting the attention of the neighbors on either side. I have to know if we have a future or not, Adriana said. Adriana, this is the 21st century. We're sitting in line to see a fortune teller. And for what? For the sake of ruining your own life, for the sake of an idiot did not stop. Wendy. Misty didn't allow for a second the idea that her friend could be happy with the man who had nearly robbed her of her identity earlier. Adriana stubbed both horns and didn't let her friend's words even fly to her ears. Think about it. Okay. Do you even need this? Wendy asked. Her voice was already shaking. Again, someone came out of the office, but this time there was no emotion on his face but sadness. It's my turn, Adriana shouted, but Wendy grabbed her arm. The young woman looked at her friend carefully, as if trying to convince her that she was making a mistake. Wendy was persistent. Adriana snatched her hand away and disappeared behind the office door. A foul odor hit her nose, incense. Some kind of white lily mint something else. The smell was sweet and cloying. I wanted to pull my sweater over my nose, just so I couldn't smell anything. Adriana sat down across from the older woman. The woman took the old woman's bony fingers over the salty deck and listened to Adriana. The old woman shuffled the deck and then laid out the cards. You're making a big mistake. The family there is strong, the old woman started to say, but Adriana interrupted her. What kind of family can there be? He's a male dog. He's not capable of making a family. Roared at Adriana, remembering the behavior of his ex. You either listen to me or get out of here, said the old woman sharply, and Adriana conciliatory raised her palms. The young woman, defiantly as if zipped up and tossed the doggie aside. The older woman nodded, accepting the surrender. She looked at the cards again. And I realize you're probably already freaking out about imagining the sweet life. But if you got him on your side, he's going to break your fate. You're meant to be a good, quiet man. If you choose another, believe me, it won't end well, said the old woman, turning over one card after another. So I'll do it with him. Did her voice quiver? Asked Adriana. No, nothing will work out for you. He doesn't need you, isn't attracted to you as a woman, wife, or friend. He looks at you as if you were nothing. He'll never love you as a woman. Do you understand? The old woman asked. You just don't know me well. Adriana replied sharply. But I know the maps well. You're chasing two birds. You'll be alone. Adriana, your husband is good, caring, kind. Do you need to talk? You need to rebuild your family, not chase men. Look, it's for you, Ethan, your usual. And the other one clings to him. She'll take care of him so much that he won't even move. If you lose your husband, you'll blame yourself for the rest of your life, the old woman said. Adriana stared at the old woman with even greater shock. She had expected help, not another lecture. If the young woman was going to listen to a lecture on her projected future, she would talk to Wendy. It felt as if it was Wendy who sat in front of her, not the fortune teller to whom she had traveled over 400 kilometers. Don't fall for his charm, fool. He'll have you on the wall before you can even squeak. It's not the kind of person you should trust with your life, you know, asked the old woman. How about I figure out who to trust with my life? You have no idea how happy I was with him. I never loved him as much in my life as Adriana said. She burst into tears of impotent anger. So do the spell and I'll pay, Adriana said, slipping her hand into her bag and pulling out her wallet. I don't want your money, and I don't do that sort of thing. I'm not going to do any coots for you. Go home, girl, and think on a fresh head. Why would you want to ruin your own life? Said the old woman. Adriana flew out of the office with such expression that absolutely everyone in the corridor stared at her. The young woman slammed the door so that the panes in the windows shook. She dashed outside for a breath of fresh air, then burst into tears. Wendy jumped out after her as she put her arm around her shoulders and sat her in the car. Adriana calmed down only about 10 minutes later when the tears simply ran out. She didn't say anything for the first time, just said it was time to go home. The car pulled out of the huge village and headed towards home. The young woman sat behind the wheel and looked at her friend. Adriana, who was unaccustomed to being in the passenger seat, had bought it like a mouse on grits. She crossed her arms over her chest and replayed the old woman's words in her head. She says he's got a family. He's not capable of a family. All he's ever done is run around with girls. What kind of a family man is he? Adriana asked, as if to say nothing. I found him on social media. He's got 2 daughters, like 1-year-old. Beautiful wife. Everything seems fine. If you go back too far, he's in a wheelchair. She must have been there for him. He figured it out, became a family man. That's what happens when people change their priorities after a tough situation, Wendy said. I don't care about my wife or my kids. He doesn't need them. You'll see. And she will thank me that I took the dog away from the family defiantly, said Adriana proudly. What do you need a man like that for? Wendy asked. Adriana was silent. She had no answer to that question. The young woman turned sideways, looked at the endless fields of white fluffy clouds that floated on the birch trees in the sky. It was so desirable to be at home, to lie in bed and sleep for several days. She had so many resentments against her husband, against Kevin, against the whole world. But Adriana would not give up. It's only in the movies that things go easy. If he leaves you, it won't end well. If a mistress becomes a wife, there's a vacancy, Wendy said. You don't want a man like that. You want to divorce Ethan, divorce someone else, but not Kevin. Why are you all talking at the same time? Adriana resented, as if she was already standing up for her man. Adriana, you need to calm down. Take a good look back at everything you've been through. You're going to have a hard time realizing it's all bullshit. There was too little good and too much bad. How many times did you come crying to me at night because he kicked you out of the apartment? How many times have you called me and told me you caught him texting again? That's enough. You didn't have anything good there. The usual emotional swings one gets hooked on like the joy hormone, Wendy summarized. You weren't there. You can't judge. You should have seen the way he looked at me. He's purposely pretending not to be interested in me to further ruin my interest, Adriana said. Adriana, maybe he really isn't interested in you. He has a family, a normal life, a job. Maybe you should get on with your life too, Wendy asked. Adriana didn't answer that question. She considered it too humiliating for her. She glanced quickly at her friend, but she shrugged. Apparently, she wasn't going to discuss anything else at all. So she turned on the radio. The young woman was also glad that she wouldn't have to defend her position and her decisions anymore. They would rather listen to another radio station than Adriana would prove that she was striving for her own happiness. As the car pulled up to the apartment building, Adriana's mood finally soured. She saw her mother on the balcony of her apartment, which made things even more difficult. Her mother was a terribly difficult person, and it was almost impossible to even make contact with her. This elderly woman could not imagine life without scandals and constant clarification of relations. Well, Adriana stretched out the needles. Wendy looked up and also saw the old woman and immediately understood Adriana. Yes, I'm lucky, Wendy said calmly. Knowing your mother, you can come and see me anytime. Adriana thanked Wendy warmly, apologized for her abruptness, and then got out of the car. The mother leaned over the railing, staring at her daughter. And where have you been loitering? She asked. I'm not 15 years old. I'll figure out where I've been loitering on my own. Adriana cut her off. Gone were the days when Adriana was financially dependent on her mother, living under her roof. Now Adriana could decide for herself what to do and how to respond to her mother. She didn't want to offend her either, at least not because of the heartache the older woman was putting so much pressure on. But letting her violate her boundaries was no good either. Adriana went up to the apartment, smelled the pleasant odor of fresh, cooked food. Except that her husband's face was clearly displeased. If only they always perceived the arrival of an elderly woman as a hard labor. Didn't you try calling us before you came? Adriana asked. Can I visit my own daughter already? Asked the mother. Adriana put both palms to her troops. Now she had completely different tasks dealing with Evelyn and was useless. I have to go to the hospital urgently to take tests, to pass. If it's so difficult for you to live with your mother, then pay for my hotel room. Evelyn objected uncontested. God, Mom, this is not a good time at all. We've got enough problems already, and you're just adding fuel to the fire. Adriana said calmly, sitting down on a chair. The fridge is empty. The man doesn't earn enough. Of course you're in trouble. And I told you right away that Ethan is a waste of space. If you complain to me about him, I'll tell you that you chose him. Her mother objected sharply, ignoring the fact that Ethan was in the other room and could hear everything perfectly well. Adriana didn't bother to talk about anything else. She ate quietly and then retired to her bedroom. Adriana wanted to consume a little. She needed to do some remote work in the evening. But the conflict that had erupted between her mother and her husband made her rise. Adriana sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to make a decision. I told you, you're not welcome here. You want to go to a hotel? I'll pay for a hotel. There's nothing to do here. And from now on, you'll call before you come here. You're in my house and suddenly you're building me up. You're not on your own turf to make a big deal out of it. Ethan persisted. Despite the heavy conversation, he never raised his voice at Evelyn. The same could not be said for the older woman. She could easily raise her voice, yell, or even get into a fight if it was to her advantage. Adriana went out into the corridor where the altercation was taking place. And you think you're a man. If I was a man, my daughter wouldn't be working. Do you even know what kind of men she had? Do you even know she's been on vacation on the islands? And with you, she's got to make every penny count. I have no idea why she chose you, Evelyn said. Outbursts howled with her hands. The older woman was clearly unhappy with the situation. There was a smug, nasty smirk on her face. Ethan began to pack his things. Adriana watched his movements carefully, looking reproachfully at her mother. Only there was no strength to stand up to her mother. "You deal with your mother, then call her," Ethan said. He slammed the door loudly and left. The elderly Mullah woman retired to the kitchen. Adriana was not happy, but maybe it was for the best. While her husband was out of the apartment, she could at least weigh everything and decide if it was worth going back to Kevin. "Thank you. Tell me later I kicked yours out. What did he offer you that you'd suddenly throw yourself at him? Did you find someone to marry? You haven't had enough good men. He doesn't make a good living. He's growing a potbelly. I don't understand why you're holding on to him so tightly," Evelyn reasoned. "He loved me. At least he used to take care of me. Everything was fine. It's just that lately we've been mixing things up," Adriana said in a sad voice. "But here's the answer to everything. You should choose a man with your head, because your care always ends. Love passes, my dear, but money remains. If you'd chosen a normal man, you wouldn't be worrying about anything now. Believe me, any disadvantages in the character of the husband can be leveled by his salary," said Evelyn. Adriana sat down at the table looking at her mother. Her mother's words made her cringe. But on the other hand, Adriana herself had once thought that way. It felt like her life was splitting in two right now. Adriana had to choose. Which one to emphasize now? Maybe my rights were worth the risk. Get my life together before the divorce proceedings even start. And for another whole evening, the older woman brainwashed her daughter, telling her to look for another man. Adriana, listening to her mother, was now making a plan that was slowly forming into a strategy in her head. The next day, determined not to procrastinate too long, Adriana bought roses, candles, expensive wine. She stayed in the office late and waited until it was just her and the department head. Adriana put Frosty to sleep in the lounge area. "Put the wine glasses down." "Adriana, and what do we have here?" asked a man, holding papers in his hands. But seeing his subordinate in surrounded lingerie against a background of rose petals froze. Adriana was sure that now he would loosen his protective barrier. Could he resist her? Adriana was sure she looked even better than she had when they were dating. "Are you out of your mind?" he asked. "Don't you want it all back?" "Kevin, let's just have a drink. Let's talk. We need to talk to you. You know, we have a lot to talk about," Adriana said. "I'm trying to sound as romantic as possible." "What's there to talk about? Have you completely lost your mind?" Kevin exclaimed. He was looking at her with crazy eyes. There was no passion in his gaze, only anger. Adriana was completely taken aback. She had never imagined that her plan could have a flaw. Now she looked at the man and could hardly believe that he had ever treated her with tenderness. "So that's what Kevin muttered." He lowered his head, set the papers aside. The man looked tired. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then continued. "Clean up this mess, get dressed, and get out of here. For the last time, I'm going to pretend like nothing happened. If you give me a farce here now, believe me, it'll end badly. You interfere with my work, I'll fire you, especially since you're not a goddamn employee." He just turned on his heels and walked away to his office. Adriana was left standing all alone, holding a half-filled glass. She sat down, emptied the glass completely, then a second one. Adriana changed her clothes, cleaned up after herself, went downstairs, and got into the car. The young woman howled with resentment, sobbed, and could not understand what she should do next. She was sure to the last that the romance would work, but nothing happened. Adriana felt she couldn't control her feelings at all. Never in her life had she sobbed so much or felt sorry for herself so often. By the time Adriana arrived home, her mother was already asleep. The girl got up to build a shower and tried to forget about everything. An inner voice told her that she should have made peace with her husband, to go back to her usual life, where everything could still be normalized. The other voice kept repeating that she just had to prove to herself that she was still attractive to Kevin. This was a challenge for her. "And what were you doing back so late last night? Don't tell me you went to see your man," her mother said with undisguised displeasure. Adriana did not know what to say to her mother. She was already completely confused about what was going on. But as long as the conversation was going on, it was worth listening to her opinion. After all, no one else could support Adriana. Wendy kept talking about Kevin having a family of his own. She kept insisting that she and God would be punished for depriving the children of a father. The husband wouldn't talk at all. He kept saying that he would only return to the apartment when her mother moved out. Adriana realized that she lacked support. If there was a person ready to take her side in this matter, it could only be her mother. "Mom, do you remember when I went out with Kevin?" Adriana asked, deciding to start at the beginning. "I remember, handsome, so tall, so handsome. I told you back then that girls would run after him." "Actually, that's what happened," said the mother, smirked. "But he was handsome, of course. How could he be?" The older woman was silent for a while. Evelyn was clearly trying to recall some special detail. She turned to her daughter, threatened her with the colonel. "And I told you you'd bite your elbows for missing me." And rightly so. Kevin always had money. He knew how to make money, and he kept you too. Remember, you had gold and fresh flowers in a vase. Yeah, he had his tantrums. But you could be patient. You didn't have the wisdom. I always thought he was going to stay," asked the mother. Adriana completely ignored her mother's words and continued her conversation. It was probably the only way to stop listening to her accusations about a past that could not be changed. "Anyway, he's back in town. He's my boss now, and I tried to connect with him. I even had an affair with him, and he cut me off," Adriana said. "Girlfriend says he's got a family there, kids, all that stuff. And when it scared you, if he's all family, he wouldn't give you a reason. He'd just tell you he didn't need you. Let me guess. Is he reacting aggressively to you?" asked the mother and Adriana. She woke up. It was true. Kevin was reacting aggressively to her, and that's why she was falling apart. If he didn't need her, he'd respond calmly, without emotion. All men are the same. "My dear, do you think he's not interested in you?" asked her mother. When Adriana told her in general everything that had happened between her and Kevin in the last few days. "If he didn't want you, he'd just fire you. Or something else to make it clear he didn't want you. He's putting a price on you. That's all." Evelyn stirred the soup and then sat down next to her daughter, taking her hand. "To hell with your Ethan. That fool's never gonna make any money. You're just gonna have to live from bread to water. He can't make money. That's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it. They'll get your femininity together and go back to yours. Kevin hasn't had a man turn you down yet. Adriana, get a hold of yourself already," Evelyn insisted. Adriana felt a rush of energy she hadn't even expected. She stared at Evelyn. She shook her head negatively, her lips pressed together. The older woman started talking again about Kevin being good. Everything could be brought back. Adriana would regret it if she gave up. And now the young woman's inner voice, which had been telling her to make peace with her husband, was so quiet, almost imperceptible. Now Adriana could safely attend to Kevin. She was already thinking of a plan to approach him. And even if she had to go against her conscience, break up the family, she was ready. Adriana wanted to feel loved again, as she had back then in her past with her mother's support. The young woman was sure it was only a matter of time now. Adriana arrived at work in high spirits. Talking to her mother now, she was definitely relieved. But fate apparently decided not to let her relax. "Adriana, run to the boss. He's been waiting for you for 5 minutes," Camille said, nodding toward the office. Kevin asked Adriana hopefully. Her eyes lit up unkindly. "No, to the principal's office. Mason's been pissing and moaning since this morning. So be prepared to have him and you crucified on the carpet," a coworker said in a disgruntled voice. "He's been giving us a hard time here." "What do you mean?" Adriana clarified. "Quickly change into your office shoes." Literally. Apparently, our blessed Kevin raided the place. Got the stats on who's working and how they're doing. Now all this paperwork's on the principal's desk, and he's decided to lump us all together and fire the hell out of us. He yelled at me for half an hour. "At least I'm sticking up for you." "I'm not sure about that at all," Camille said. Adriana looked at herself in the mirror, painted her lips, and went to the boss's office. a well-fed man with childishly red cheeks. Mason was sitting at his desk. He was arguing with someone on the phone. The man pointed his finger toward a chair. Adriana obediently sat down and waited her turn. Mason was generally a very hot-tempered man, so it wasn't the first time she'd heard him give her a hard time. "Well, let's get this sorted out," the man said. He looked at the papers, then looked up at her and smirked. "Why are you dressed up for work like a holiday?" "I'm in a good mood," Adriana parried, trying to speak with all the courtesy she could muster. "Well, I know your good mood. Did you even see that you have the worst scores? Adriana, how can you even work like this? You got a complaint about you from your boss." "He says he's busy with non-work issues," said Mason. "Yeah, what does he know?" Adriana said sharply, but she closed her mouth when she saw Mason's angry look. "I know you like the back of my hand. You're all about the tail wagging. Do you think no one sees you hanging around his neck, Adriana? Don't embarrass yourself. Go back to work. You're paid by the piece. And you make like a cashier at the grocery store." The man got up from his chair, walked to the window. He crossed his arms over his chest and now spoke without turning to Adriana. "Get to work already. How many times can you do this? You still think you'll find a rich husband. Adriana is not the age to believe in fairy tales. Miranda made 100 this month, and you barely scraped together 20. By God, you'd better use your looks in your work to drain clients' minds," he said. Adriana came out of the office absolutely red as a cancer. She shrank like a spring that was about to shoot someone in the forehead. She sat down at her desk and tried to concentrate on her work, but it wasn't working. The young woman didn't even look in the direction of Kevin's office. This was something he had purposely built to saw her off even more. She would put him in his place, destroy his family, lure him into her arms, and then leave him alone. The young woman felt so angry that even the plan in her head formed itself. She didn't need it. She had romance and feelings. She just wanted to put the arrogant ex in his place. After an hour, however, her fervor faded. All that was left was resentment and some subtle disappointment. Adriana tried to work, to earn some money before the paycheck, but apparently it was not her case. When she arrived home, she was happy to find her husband's car in the driveway. She was even surprised at her own joy. Maybe she should have given up the whole thing and gone back to her husband after all. There was always the possibility of trying to rebuild the family. Maybe she and Ethan still had a way to go. What if the subject decided he would try for his family? But barely had Adriana entered the apartment when immediately her hopes were absolutely dashed. Mother stood, crossed her arms on her chest, and read, "Vaughn, look. Your hubby finally decided to move out," said her mother, chuckling. "Like a rat running away from the ship. Look at him. And I told you he's got nothing to show for it. All ripped off. Adriana, take your mother out, or I won't be able to take care of myself," Ethan said calmly. Adriana went into the bedroom, slammed the door shut, and left her husband alone. Ethan didn't even look at her, just tried to leave the apartment as quickly as possible. "Something's up. Jesus, yeah, she's leaving in 3 days, and you're already running away behind my back. And if I come back later, all I'd have found were empty shelves," asked Adriana. Now she suddenly smelled a note of maternal resentment in her voice. Adriana felt ashamed that she was becoming like her mother. She felt powerless to make a decision. Her husband looked at her as if she were nothing to him. "I've thought it over. I've made a decision. We should live apart. We'll think about how and what to do. Maybe you're right. It's time to get a divorce already. There's nothing to do here," Ethan said. When Adriana herself had talked about divorce, the idea had seemed appropriate. But as soon as she heard those words from her husband's lips, pain pierced her heart. She felt resentment, anger at herself, and a longing for their past life. Adriana could not explain her own emotions of resentment. She could not even utter a word. She just looked at Ethan with her eyes. "I know it's all too complicated right now. Look, Adriana, we just need to live apart, you know. I know you're not happy about this. But you have to realize, too, that this can't go on forever," Ethan asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. He tapped the palm of his hand beside him for her to sit up. But Adriana remained standing, looking through him. You and I really don't feel like we have a marital relationship anymore. I'm not saying we should get a divorce right now, but we should definitely live separately and figure out what we both need. Maybe you're right, and we've gotten too wrapped up in things, Ethan asked, and then get divorced. Find yourself a girl and live like nothing happened, asked Adriana. Adriana felt a clear desire not to give him up to anyone. Some inner feeling of her own had played a cruel trick. I didn't say I was looking for someone, he said. Adriana just looked at him, afraid to say a word. Let's just live apart and see how things go. I'm going through a rough patch at work, and what are you like? You're not yourself. Shouldn't we be working through things together? Adriana asked. I've tried, but you pushed me away. Okay, Adriana. And I'm off, Ethan said. He leaned in to kiss her, but Adriana declined. The man realized he'd hurt her by leaving, but he didn't do anything more. Soon, Ethan left the apartment, leaving behind only the subtle scent of perfume. Adriana suddenly sank down on the bed and sobbed so loudly that she didn't even expect it from herself. She was crying because she realized that everything was falling apart around her. What would she do when she was alone? Who needs her with her temper? And why are you throwing a tantrum here? He's gone, and to hell with him. The trash took itself out. Mother said sharply, and then she laughed unpleasantly. How dare you say that? Adriana suddenly cried through her tears. She felt such a burning anger towards her mother that she couldn't even explain it. Adriana got up from the bed. You have taken to strutting. And you, how did we start talking? You were in my ears yesterday about your ex, and now you suddenly decided to fight for your husband, asked the mother with a smirk. Don't give me the snot. It's a swamp. What's there to cry about? You're a pacifier, not a man. You didn't keep your family together, and you expect me to be left empty-handed too. No way, Mom. Get your stuff and get out of here. If it wasn't for you, Ethan wouldn't have left at all, said Adriana. Don't you dare push me around. Yeah, look at her. You should be thanking me for walking him out. He was as worried about you as any normal man would be about moving into his wife's apartment. And in general, consider that if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have this apartment at all. The old woman cut off. It's my father's apartment. He left it to me when he died, Adriana parried. Aha, who picked that kind of father for you? The Holy Spirit cut the older woman off. Ethan's not a man at all. He's a snot on legs. He's not worthy of you. He shouldn't even be around you. You've had so many men, so many opportunities, and you've chosen some scumbag. Shut up. Get out of here. I don't want to see you. You spent my whole childhood jumping all over men. And now you've decided to ruin my family too. Go away. Adriana screamed. The old woman proudly stuck up her nose, quickly packed her things, and in just 15 minutes she disappeared. Adriana was still sobbing. Several times she tried to call her husband, but he did not pick up the phone. She felt so bad that everything inside was clenching with pain, tearing herself apart. What hurt the most was that she had absolutely no idea how to proceed or what to do next. When Adriana came to her favorite cafe, it was as if a stone had fallen from her soul. She felt calm, peaceful. But today it wasn't like that. She felt confused, as if she subconsciously sensed that the situation in her life was escalating. Adriana was losing control. You do realize you have to put up with your husband. Adriana, everyone has crises, fights. It's normal. You need to pull yourself together, talk to your spouse, and finally make a decision. You're adults. You can't just give up on him. Wendy asked. Adriana was silent. She drank coffee, looked out the window, thought about everything that was going on in her life. Outside, the summer season was slowly coming to an end. Even though it was still August on the calendar, the weather was clearly September. A pleasant cool breeze, comfortable temperature, and some kind of cozy atmosphere. Adriana regretted that the summer season had passed. She loved the heat, she loved to go to the sea, and every year she waited for the beginning of summer. And as soon as this wonderful time for her ended, everything seemed to sink into despondency. Usually the young woman found the strength to pull herself out of the sadness, to return to normal life. But this time there was so much on her that she could no longer carry it all on her shoulders. "Do you think he still thinks about me?" Adriana asked. "You're married, aren't you?" "Of course we are. It's just that you're in a crisis. We need to talk things over calmly, meet, and not make hasty decisions. Everyone needs to be apart from each other from time to time. It's just that you're both having problems. That's why you're fighting with each other. But when you get through it together, the crisis will be much easier. You'll see," Wendy said. "I don't mean Ethan," Adriana said grudgingly. "Although I don't know who I'm thinking of anymore. I miss the subject too. And I hate myself for not going with Kevin to another country. Why the hell did I stay home here?" Adriana's eyes were wet. Duma didn't take her hand to reassure her. Everything squeezed inside. "I'm so angry with myself and with him. I want time to turn back, for us to be together again. But on the other hand, I want to go back to Ethan, to be calm and quiet. I must be going crazy. Some kind of endless obsession," Adriana said. "Maybe you should take a vacation, or quit this job and find another one. You won't have a life there anyway, as long as Kevin is there," Wendy said. As soon as Adriana thought about quitting and never seeing him again, Kevin became uncomfortable in her heart. She no longer realized whether it was actually feelings, nerves, or real feelings talking in her. Adriana could no longer understand where the real feelings were and where her heightened nervousness was. They sat in the cafe for about an hour, several mugs of coffee, empty plates from dessert left on the table. Wendy walked Adriana to her car. They stood in the parking lot but couldn't separate. "Let's go on vacation with you. We'll be near the sea for at least a few days and say goodbye. With summer, you'll have time to breathe." "Adriana, you have too much on your mind right now. You're not thinking straight. You need time," said Wendy. Adriana did not react to this suggestion, but as soon as she got into the car, she decided that she would make one single attempt. But this time she'd go to the bank. Yesterday, Kevin was flirting with her. At least it seemed that way to her, which meant he still had feelings for her. For days, Adriana had been tracking Kevin and his wife. She had clearly calculated the schedule of the woman who took the children to daycare, then to clubs. Adriana calculated the times when Kevin's wife was not home. Adriana arrived, walked to the entryway, dialed a number. She called another apartment, identified herself as a delivery person, and was let inside. Overjoyed, Adriana took off up the stairs. She knocked on the door. Kevin opened the door with a smile, but when he saw Adriana, he was taken aback. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Have you lost your fear?" he asked. "Your wife won't be here for another hour, so we have time," Adriana said affectionately. She wanted to rush into the apartment, but Kevin pushed her away rather roughly. "Sick in the head, Adriana. Pull yourself together. Otherwise, I'm gonna ride you. For Java, by God, I don't need you at all. Get out of here," he shouted. Adriana salivated. From how wildly he shouted at her, his voice echoed off the walls of the entryway, becoming even louder and more menacing. The young woman, looking into the eyes of the man who on his knees had sworn his love to her, could not believe that he had changed so much in so many years. But even though the scream released his anger, Kevin did not become calmer. Rather the opposite, he was getting angrier and angrier. His face was starting to turn red. Adriana got the impression that even the top of his head was turning red from how much negativity he was holding back. "You've always been just a toy to me, you know. An underage fool who fell for the gifts. That's all. I never needed you. I never loved you. Hear me at last," Kevin continued to shout. He didn't even think about the fact that the neighbors could hear this conversation. He was so mad with anger that he lost control of himself. "You gave me a sweet life back then, and I've been trying to get rid of you for a long time. I have a normal life, a beautiful wife, a great job. But then you show up again. You're trying to build a relationship with me over some interesting hunch. You're sick in the head. Be honest with me. Maybe you need to see a specialist," shouted Kevin. Adriana couldn't utter a single word. She was crying tears of fear and frustration. She felt completely fictional, sucked dry. She stared into his insanely angry eyes and tried to find a shred of sympathy for her in them. "Idiot, I don't need you. How else do you want me to tell you?" He shouted. "But you're flirting oval with me," Adriana muttered in a trembling voice. "You're sick. Do you take common courtesy for flirting? Is that supposed to be fun? I have a beautiful family. I love my wife dearly, and you come in here and ruin my life. Either you leave here now or I'll throw you down the stairs," he said, taking a step forward. Adriana involuntarily backed away, lost her tears, and then ran down the stairs. She couldn't even make out the road as tears made her eyes water. It was so hurtful, so bitter, she could barely hold on. But as soon as the entryway door swung open, Adriana ran head-on into Kevin's wife. "Oh, sorry," involuntarily involved V. Adriana. Noticing that this young woman was so soft, decided to push through. If this idiot failed to see the potential in her, she will get back at him. "I'm sorry, before you tell Adriana your man, I'm sorry. And I slept with him the whole time you were here with your kids. He promised me he'd marry me. He promised me a nice life. Now, Barton, go deal with your cable. Don't listen to her. She's a sick fool. Get out of here," a man shouted from the window. Adriana saw what had gotten through to the fragile nervous system of Kevin's wife. The young woman froze in her eyes. Tears and a dull ache appeared in her eyes. Adriana waved her head smugly and walked to the car. She walked with a sense of accomplishment, confident that she had at least mutilated Kevin's life. Adriana drove home, so proud, so happy that she couldn't believe it herself. She hadn't felt such a triumphant feeling in her chest in a long time. But the closer Adriana got to home, the more she realized what a monstrous mistake she had made. Why had she even reached into the family in the first place? Why had she said mean things to his wife? Maybe he really wasn't flirting with her, but was just being polite. Adriana is on shaky legs, walked into her own apartment, and just cried in the shower. She tried to call Kevin, but immediately realized she was added to a blacklist. Everything was so stupid that she wanted to fall through the ground. As soon as Adriana left the shower and went into the kitchen, she immediately poured herself a full glass of wine to the brim. She turned on some stupid movie, drank wine, and replayed in her head the nightmare that had happened in a matter of minutes. She was disgusted with herself. As the wine began to take effect, the young woman gradually calmed down. She longed for her husband so much, felt so foolish in his eyes, that she could not help herself. And when she heard Ethan's voice, she was relieved for a moment. "Yes, I'm listening." "Just speak quickly, please," Ethan said, a little flustered. In a flash, Adriana had a picture in her mind of her husband sitting in a cafe with some girl. Or maybe he'd taken her to the restaurant to get her into bed. Jealousy surfaced in her with renewed vigor. It was right, and Adriana wouldn't be able to forgive herself. And if she misses her husband? "Adriana, I told you to make it quick. We're in the middle of a work emergency." "I'm not even on the phone right now," Ethan said, as if he could read her jealousy-filled mind. For a few more seconds before the call started, Adriana was full of confidence. She knew what she was going to say and how this conversation would end. But now it was as if she swallowed her tongue and began to stutter. "Topic, you and I need to talk. I missed you so much. We really need to solve everything. I'm not a bad person," she said and cried. "Adriana, I'm not interested in your tears right now," Ethan said more calmly and quietly. "Let me call you in a few hours. I don't have time right now. I'll live alone for now. I have to think about it." Adriana hung up the phone herself. The young woman leaned back in her chair and just stared at one point. How was she going to live her life now? Would he really divorce her? She almost destroyed her own family to get back together with her ex. And for what? Adriana felt so stupid all of a sudden that she felt disgusted. Ethan had been right to just pack up and leave. She wasn't worth it. Adriana lowered her head with her forehead, touched the cold table. Somehow she felt so sad that she couldn't put that sadness into words. She didn't even want to cry. It just hurt. If they'd gone to a counselor, maybe they could repair their relationship and start communicating like they used to. Ethan would start courting her again. Adriana would have given him some nice romantic surprises. Would it all fall apart now? If Ethan wanted to be with her, he'd probably come over right now, apologize for his behavior, and they'd start living together again. This empty apartment was completely foreign. When Ethan wasn't there, Adriana missed him terribly. Now all her fiddling around with Kevin seemed like nonsense. She hadn't cheated on her husband. She'd gotten over it. Adriana felt like a traitor. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had no right to rebuild her relationship with her husband. On Monday, Adriana was going to work. Everything was falling out of her hands. There was a bad feeling. Everything was so mixed up in her head that Adriana wouldn't even react if she was fired. She got in her car, pulled out, and just headed towards the office, wanting in all seriousness to turn around, stay home, call her boss, and quit. Turns out Adriana was right on the money. When she got to the office, no one wanted to talk to her at all. Everyone walked around with their noses up their asses, like she was some kind of stranger. Adriana had worked here for years. Why the sudden attitude? Always helping everyone. Never fought with anyone and certainly never tried to drive anyone out of the workplace like some people. It's better to quit well, Camille said, crossing her arms over her chest. Yes, Camille is right, said Miranda, adopting the same pose. They stood like twins. Even their dress code was similar. Adriana still didn't understand what was going on. Staring at her former coworkers and friends. Now it seemed she had clearly crossed them. Girls, what the hell is going on? This isn't about jealousy. I make less money than you guys. Adriana said with a chuckle, what the hell is going on? You decided to ruin your family, and then you come here and think you'll be patted on the head. David asked in amazement. Now everyone was turning against her. Literally, the whole office was standing as if waiting for the trial. Adriana involuntarily took a step back. She looked into the faces of the people who hated her overnight, although just a few days ago they had hated her. David, have you forgotten that I'm the reason you work here? I'm the one who brought you here. Insistent, said Adriana. And you, if it wasn't for me, I would have fired you 6 months ago. Miranda, I was actually filling in for you on maternity leave so you wouldn't get fired. Are you two in cahoots? Adriana exclaimed in amazement. Surprised at their ingratitude. Adriana, come into the office, said the boss. Adriana took a deep breath, exhaled, looked at everyone with the most angry look she was capable of. She walked into the office of the warden. He immediately handed her a glass of cold, sparkling water. Adriana sat down in the chair and lowered her head low. She realized that apparently the situation that had happened the other day had become public knowledge. Yes, I understand. I made a huge mistake. I'm so sorry. I even tried to call him and tell him how stupid I was. I got emotional. Now I feel like a complete idiot, said Adriana. You know, I don't care who you slept with, what you were gonna do. I don't even care about his family. This is my business. And business is money. Dear Adriana, I could go out on the street and pick up a dozen of them. So I can't call you a valuable employee. But the likes of Kevin, you can't find anyone like Kevin. If you knew how hard I worked to get him in here, you'd think a little more about your stupid head, the boss said. Adriana remained silent. She took the insult in stride. There was, after all, truth in what the superior had said, wasn't there? She was still silent, waiting to see what would happen next. But judging by the mood of the boss, only dismissal awaited her. What statement to write? She asked. Yes, be kind enough to write at your own request. I'll calculate your money right now. You don't have to work the extra 2 weeks, he said. Negatively shook his head, Adriana grimaced. She calmly wrote the application and took the money. She left the office. She did not look at everyone who sat in the office and now squinted angrily. You're like a flock of sheep. I've helped you all. Yeah, a lot of you wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for me. No, you fell for it. Took a lynch mob and lived with it all you want. I'm not going anywhere with you. Adriana cut her off sharply. She slammed the door, went downstairs. Adriana stepped out into the parking lot and suddenly felt the brakes sound. Darkness had fallen. It's okay, wait. There were monotone voices, probably all different people talking. Adriana felt pain, then nausea from the pain. Her head was spinning in her ears, noise crackling in her ears. Let's be careful. Another voice sounded, already lower. Adriana felt herself being lifted up, placed on something, suddenly a needle. Then came bliss. Nothing. The pain seemed to gradually dissolve, leaving behind only memories. After about 20 minutes, Adriana realized she was sitting in an ambulance. "So calmly look over here," said a very thin woman, checking her pupils. "You look like you've been hit by a car. We're going to the hospital now. We're going to check everything out. You look fine. Don't look at your leg. We'll figure it out. This isn't the 15th century." Adriana looked at her foot, against her warning. It was covered in blood. She burst, threw her head back so she couldn't see anything. "At least I didn't feel any more pain." She was brought to the hospital. A couple more hours later, she was sitting in the waiting room. The situation wasn't critical, so it was okay to not leave her in the hospital. Adriana had no one to count on. Even with Wendy, she and Wendy had had a falling out. And when she saw Ethan at the hospital door, she just cried. He looked at her with the same love and tenderness he had before. As soon as he sat down next to her, Adriana snuggled into his shoulder and told him everything. "Please forgive me, I'm so stupid, God, I'm just an idiot. I'm going to see a psychologist, honestly. I'm so sorry, please. I don't want to go on being without you," Adriana said. He just listened to her. It felt like Ethan was aware of the situation, so he didn't react. He helped her up and walked her to her car. They drove to their apartment. An hour later, Ethan brought all of his things back. Adriana noticed that the vast majority of the suitcases remained closed. Apparently, he wanted to go back, but he kept hesitating. "I will always appreciate you. This is a lifelong lesson for me." "Forgive me, please," Adriana said. "I had an affair too, but flirting like that and at work. And I thought I was falling in love again. We didn't have anything. Just one meeting. We didn't even kiss. I just wanted to be alone to figure out what was more important to me. And I realized I don't want to start over. I want everything back with us, especially since the two of us now realize we have to try," Ethan said. That night, they never went to bed. The couple talked for a long time. Well, they finally came to an understanding. Early that morning, as Adriana was about to go to jail, all she could think about was her husband. After everything that had happened, it was as if the relationship had grown deeper and stronger than before. It would be a lesson to both of them that you have to have a relationship. You have to work at it and not just run around looking for new feelings. Gradually, the broken leg would heal, and their relationship would become even stronger. Ethan is back to being the caring person he used to be, and Adriana much more tender and affectionate. They were talking to each other again, as if the relationship wasn't even a couple months old. But one day, 2 weeks after Adriana had been in the hospital, she saw a familiar car under her windows. Taking her crutches for comfort, Adriana stepped outside, well aware of who had arrived. Kevin stepped out of the vehicle. For the first time in a long time, Adriana felt absolutely nothing but dislike for him. He was now a complete stranger to her. No, Adriana didn't blame him for anything. After all, she was the one who made up the perfect relationship in her head, not him. "Look, we need to talk, but without yelling," Kevin said. "Talk here in the apartment. I won't let you in," Adriana said calmly, looking at him blankly. "Anyway, it's my fault. I should have talked to you calmly instead of making a farce of what you took for a game. Anyway, they fired you for me." Anyway," said Kevin, holding out the papers to her. "There are checks for payment. I totally bought online training for you. There's job placement, so you'll have a new job if anything. I'll take over financially while you study." "Why so excited all of a sudden?" Adriana asked. "I don't understand why he's being so soft on her. A few weeks ago, he nearly threw her down the stairs. And now he's being nice, offering to help her financially. My husband earns enough to keep me in school." Adriana caught herself thinking that she spoke of her husband with pride. Everything inside her was now in order. "It was my sister who hit you. Or rather, she just wanted to scare you. But she overdid it. Anyway, now she's hiding in the middle of nowhere, afraid you'll report her," he said. Adriana looked up at him in surprise. She and his sister had once been best friends. And now what? "She was afraid you'd break up the family and leave the kids without a father." Like I can't make my own decision. Anyway, I hope you and I can work something out. I'll pay for the treatment. What else do you need? Kevin spoke calmly. I won't write a statement. Tell her thank you. If it wasn't for her, maybe the bright thought of reconciling with my husband wouldn't have appeared in my stupid head. That, first of all, Adriana said, and then looked at the papers. Thank you so much for paying the tuition for this year. I will get a new profession. A great chance for me to start over, and I don't need any collateral. It was immediately noticeable that a mountain had literally fallen off the man's shoulders. He exhaled, smiled. He was immediately relieved. When the car pulled up, Adriana looked at her husband with a smile. He was clearly disturbed by the stranger. And I brought the severance pay, Kevin said, pointing to the papers. Well, okay, I gotta go. Thanks for compromising. She nodded. He didn't seem like a handsome, promising guy to her now. He was just a man who was a total stranger to her. And really, if you took off the rose-colored glasses in their past relationship, there hadn't been many good times. When Adriana took the elevator up to the apartment with her husband, she told him about the papers and the training. Are you really not going to write an application? Asked her husband. No, I won't. Let's consider it my punishment for being too long-nosed and overconfident. I still have some work to do because I feel guilty still calmly, she said. He didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Adriana had been trying to build up her courage for days, but she realized it was impossible. She just had to go and do it. The young woman drove up to the very apartment where she had once caused a scandal. She sat in the car for several hours until she saw Kevin's wife come out into the yard with a stroller. I'm sorry, Adriana said softly. The woman's face turned stern in an instant. She looked at her with a kind of implacable anger. Adriana understood her feelings perfectly. I came to apologize calmly, Adriana said. I had some kind of adolescent maximalism, my complexes and stupidity in my head. I just wanted to apologize for what I said to you about your husband. Nothing happened between us. He sewed me up and kept telling me he had a beautiful wife. The more Adriana spoke, the more the woman's face softened. She suddenly noticed that Adriana already had tears glistening on her face. I almost lost my husband because of this idiocy. I'm really sorry I was staggered. And your family is wildly ashamed that I looked like a fool and almost ruined your life, Adriana said. Well, apology accepted if you want to help. I'd be happy to, with a smile, said the woman. Adriana nodded vigorously. They walked to the store together. On the way back, Adriana carried heavy bags of groceries. At the bottom of the stroller were bottles of clean water. It's not so smooth sailing for us. So you were just the last straw. I hope we can find the strength to reconcile and keep the family together. We have daughters growing up. I don't blame you. I know exactly how my husband behaves. All his courtesy and supposed politeness often looks like flirting, the woman said in an unhappy voice. Thank you for helping me carry it. I live alone now. It's a bit hard to cope. Apparently he hasn't changed at all, Adriana said, and the woman nodded. I guess he has. It's not for nothing that my mother told me that people don't change, and you shouldn't expect others to change. All right, come on. I'll take the carrier. And you stay with the stroller, please, she said. Adriana was alone with the stroller. The 2-year-old was sound asleep, or maybe she was under 2 years old. Adriana had no idea, no way to determine the ages of children since she had none of her own. And as a child, she hadn't taught anyone. When the woman came out of the entryway again, already behind the stroller, she looked a little sad. Thank you for apologizing. It means a lot to me, she said. When Kevin gets back from his business trip, I'll tell him you came by. It'll make it easier for me and him to fight. Thank you for forgiving me, said Adriana with a guilty smile. For a few minutes, Adriana sat in the car just looking out the window. She felt many times better when she finally apologized. Maybe it really was worth it. The shame had gotten much worse than it had been before the apology. But the more time passed, the weaker it weakened. A few days later, Adriana received a message from Kevin saying that he was grateful for her apology. He was able to repair his relationship with his wife, and now he won't do anything stupid. Adriana told Ethan everything. He was very proud of her for apologizing. Even before the cast was finally removed, Adriana and Ethan started to see a family psychologist. It turned out that they had accumulated a large number of mutual resentments that they had not spoken about. After the first sessions, it was hard to restore balance in the couple. But the longer they practiced with the specialist, the easier it was for them to reconnect. The relationship became more tender and deeper. A shared hobby emerged, and they also learned to sit down and talk every week and come up with something to do together. A year passed. Adriana learned to get a job. She started earning good money. At the same time, without leaving the house. She liked her new profession and was grateful to Kevin for it. As it turned out, Kevin did not stay at the new workplace for long. He quickly replaced the director and took his place. As far as Adriana knew, Kevin and his wife were still living together. They were expecting their third child. Adriana didn't know how smooth their relationship was. She didn't want to meddle with other people's destinies anymore. Adriana reconciled with Wendy. They were best friends again, just like before. Adriana was very grateful to Tommy for trying to talk her out of it. Wendy had gotten married and they were now family friends. There was no way Adriana could wait for her husband to come home from work. She was holding a small gift she wanted to give him for their anniversary. She was insanely grateful to herself for such a lesson. She had never been happier in her life than she had been since she had decided to keep her family together. They finally had harmony, true love, quiet happiness. "I'm home," he said. Entering the apartment, Harris sprinted out into the hallway to him before she could wait. He held in his hand a small cake and a bouquet of flowers. "Happy holiday, beloved. Happy holiday. I have a present for you. By the way," she said. She smiled radiantly. Adriana handed him the box. Ethan put it on the shelf. He changed his clothes and then, taking the box, opened it. The man thought it contained the watch he wanted, but there turned out to be a truly lavish gift, tied to a red ribbon. In the box was a positive pregnancy test. Ethan sat on his ass like that. "It's true. I've even been to the doctor already. They all confirmed the subject, you're going to be a daddy," she said and cried. He suddenly picked her up and from his seat lifted her in his arms and surrounded her. He kissed her endlessly. "Oh my God, is it really true? We're going to be mommy and daddy." He repeated a little, "And I can't believe it myself. Can you believe we're going to be parents? Can you believe it?" She repeated through tears, years of trying behind her. That evening they spent in love and understanding tenderness, imagining how they would have a baby, how they would cope with difficulties together, as if this child was a reward from above for the fact that they were able to keep the relationship. And Adriana herself was madly happy that fate had given them such a gift.